All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to New Frontiers Learning. It's Crackdown night with focus on quantitative methods. Thank you very much for joining us. Tonight we have a very special faculty member, facilitator extraordinaire, who has been responsible for the success of quite a number of candidates over the years, and we are so excited to have him here once again tonight. His name is Niyi Ogunbayo. We call him the Prof. And tonight we'll be focused on helping us with quantitative methods. And I'm sure you're excited to be here as well. Yes, the session is going to be recorded. It's been recorded already. Tony, thank you. So we'll just jump into the program. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's going to be a wonderful time. If there's somebody who you know should be here, please send them a message and inform them that we've started already. It's going to be a very awesome night. Thank you once again for joining. The agenda tonight, very simple. Welcome and introductions. We'll be sharing specific tips for QM mastery at each level. Level 1 and 2 precisely. We'll take questions from candidates. Then there'll be a brief presentation. And of course, we have questions to ask from you, our audience as well. And the winners will go home with our prizes, right? As we promised. And then we'll conclude the night. We expect to have a very beautiful evening. And we hope that you will be fully involved and participatory all through. Please feel free to ask your questions when it's time to ask them. Through the chat, and we are just here to have a wonderful time tonight. So welcome once again to Crackdown Night. My name is Ayokunle Akerotimi, and I'll be your host tonight. And we are our facilitator for tonight is Mr. Niyi Ogunbayo. He's a known face in this space. Mr. Niyi Ogunbayo is the founder and chief executive officer of Quant Investment Managers Limited. He has over 15 years professional experience covering financial advisory, investment research, and strategy, financial modeling, portfolio management, securities trading, and having worked with top Nigerian banks and investment firms. Mr. Niyi currently serves as an independent member of the investment committees for a number of investment funds in Nigeria. And prior to his current endeavors, he has worked as the CEO and managing director of Affinity Capital Management Limited, a boutique proprietary trading firm with primary focus on fixed income securities and currency hedge products. Before this, Niyi worked as a pioneer head of fixed income trading desk at Cardinal Stone Partners, where he was primarily responsible for setting up and managing the firm's fixed income trading business. He also worked as a bond strategist and trader in the Treasury Department of Bank PHB PLC and was a senior financial analyst / portfolio manager at PHB Asset Management Limited, where he initiated coverage reports on top 15 banks in Nigeria, and later acted as portfolio manager, fixed income securities. He also worked with the strategy and financial modeling division of United Bank for Africa, PLC, that's UBA, where he was primarily responsible for developing financial planning and pricing models for various subsidiaries of the bank. He began his professional career at Meristem Securities Limited, where he assumed the role of an equity research / corporate finance analyst, and played a vital role in packaging equity capital raising for FTN Cocoa PLC and Feedsin Healthcare PLC. Niyi holds certification in mathematics for financial engineers, statistics for financial engineers, and C++ programming for financial engineering from University of California, United States. He is also a first-class graduate of economics from Obafemi Awolowo University, and he's an associate of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICANN. He's an associate of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, ACCA, in the United Kingdom. He's an associate of the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers, CIS. He's an authorized dealing clerk of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. He's a certified financial risk manager of the Global Association of Risk Professionals in the United States. And of course, he's a charter holder with the CFA Institute, domicile United States. So tonight, I'm excited to bring to you Mr. Niyi Ogunbayo. Prof, welcome.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Akunle, for the introduction. So
Okay.
I hope we have a good time together this evening.
You said what?
I hope we have a good time together this evening.
Absolutely, we would. We would. Thank you very much. So, welcome everyone once again. And so we'll just get right into it. But before we, get in and what Prof will be doing right away is to share tips. It's quantitative methods. It's a lot. It's highly calculative, highly mathematical, and so we have to make the most of every time we have tonight. But then, just to be sure, right, that we are making the right impact and we are reaching the right people, we need to hear from you, the audience, what your expectations are for tonight. So if I'm able to get 2, 3, 4, 5 people, just type in the comment section in the chat box and say, okay, this is my expectation for tonight. Just before we begin to discuss the strategies for each level, what's most important at level 1, what's most important at level 2 for quantitative on methods. So it will be good if I'm able to get that. So audience, please, let's get on our keypads and start talking about what our expectation is tonight. So if you are there, just type, it's good to be here. My expectations are this. We just want to know what those expectations are so that we can work at exceeding them. That's primarily why we are here tonight. So let's get started. I won't be able to continue without it, so let's have. Okay, Onyeye Mbidom, thank you. I'm writing level 1 again. I've started reading for quantitative methods. I hope to deepen my understanding with the meeting. Thank you very much. Absolutely, Prof can hear that. Thank you. I'm waiting for you guys. Okay, thanks, Damilare, thank you. I was awarded the CFA Student Scholarship, and my expectation is to understand quants and the basic rudiments for the November exams. Thank you. You're at the right place. Thank you, Lawrence. That's good. Welcome, and congratulations on your scholarship. Hopefully, you bag the scholarship from New Frontiers for tuition. So that could be double scholarship for you, but that will depend on your level of participation tonight. Hopefully, thank you, Lawrence. Okay, I've had 2. I need 2 more, then we can jump in. Let's be quick about this. Oluwasegun, thank you. It's great to be here. I expect to see tips and tricks that will make quant. Just a minute. It's now running in fast. That will make quants easier to study and understand, especially for persons of non-quantitative background. Absolutely. Thank you very much. That's taking note of. Thank you. Zainab Lawal, I would like to get an overview of quick ways to remember all the formulas without getting anxious. Okay. Thank you. Abiodun Dawodu, good to be here. I'm writing level 2. I started reading QM and was seeming tough, so I put it aside to focus on FSA. So I'm hoping to get a better grasp of it. Thank you. Abdul Kerimu Sule got the scholarship as well, and I'm hungry to clear level 1 by November 2022. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's just dive right into it. So thank you. Your expectations are noted, and definitely I expect that they will be exceeded to the best of our ability tonight. So, Prof, once again, you are welcome. And at this point, Prof, the question I like to ask at this time is that, are there specific tips, right, for mastery? I mean, if there's anything that a level 1 student should know, or a level 2 student should know when it comes to the QM exam, what to pay attention to, just tips that would help them, ace this exam. Are you able to share that tonight? I think we should begin from there. Just specific tips that can help, areas where they should focus their attention on, how to read for this exam. That's what we really want to hear now. So, Prof, you're welcome once again.
Yeah, thank you, Akunle. Yeah, you know, let's start by, people see quant in CFA program the way they see mathematics, maybe in secondary school or some other learning program. So many people will just say, since an average person doesn't like mathematics, so many people will just say, quant is not for me. No. But the interesting thing is that for quant generally, even in CFA exam, more than half of the questions will not involve calculation.
Wow.
More than half of the questions will not involve calculation.
Wow.
So it's mostly the concept. That means if you understand all the concepts and you don't know how to do a single calculation, you understand all the concepts, you should at least get 50% in quant in the exam, be it level 1 or level 2.
Wow.
And that's things that involve calculations to answer and things that do not involve calculations to answer. So it's like 50-50. So the focus is on the logic, you understanding the logic, not you doing calculations as if you are the calculator. Because the word we are preparing for, all those manual calculations, all those predetermined tasks, they've been automated.
True.
But the logic underlining you defining the problems, knowing how to read the results, interpret, and make use of it in making decisions, they cannot automate that. And that is why we've observed they are adding elements of computer programming or data analytics to CFA curriculum across board.
Very true. Very true.
So the focus should be on the logic behind the maths and what it means, the implication of whatever you've computed. So most people struggle in quant because they've not had that basic understanding of that logic underlying every QM concept. So they are looking at the calculations, but they're not looking at the message behind the calculation. And what I will advise you is to focus on the message behind the calculation, such that if you understand properly or fully the message behind the calculation, in fact, you may go into the exam without even practicing questions because you understood the message underlining the problem. So any problem they give to you in the exam, so you are comfortable answering it. So that's the line, that's the threshold you need to reach. You need to understand the logic, the message behind every calculations that you think you're doing. So I don't want you to, that's why I don't want to see it as maths. Just see it as a problem solving that will aid your investment decisions. And QM is seen also, some people see it as academic, that is not what they need in CFA and all of that. But as you will realize later, there are some analysis you want to do as a portfolio manager or as an investment manager that will rely strongly on your understanding of quantitative methods. Otherwise, you will not be able to do those kind of analysis. So you can talk top of your head, but when it comes to, okay, roll up your sleeves, let's look at the deep relationship behind what we are talking about, then you may begin to struggle. So I wanted to see QM as an integral part of the whole body of knowledge that you are trying to attain or acquire. So that's the best way to look at it. And I can tell you that, in fact, the most important concept in evaluating investments anywhere in the world is actually covered in QM level 1. The most important aspect of investments.
Interesting.
When it comes to understanding investment, anything related to, in fact, broadly speaking, finance is covered in QM. And that's the topic they call time value of money. So everything investment relies on you understanding the time value of money. And that's the first reading in QM level 1. So if you don't understand time value of money properly, then it is difficult for me to see you doing very well as an investment manager. It's going to be very tough. then you may struggle in other subjects that rely on most other subjects like equity, fixed income, derivative, portfolio management, all those subjects, they rely on you understanding the time value of money. You'll be doing compounding, discounting, compounding, discounting, compounding, discounting, either explicitly or implicitly. And sometimes the thing you see as formulas, there are explanations behind them, such that if you know the explanations, then the formulas will naturally come to you.
True.
So that's also very important. That's why understanding the logic behind what looks like calculation, the maths, I think is overriding objective that you should pursue. So that I can find the exam, the materials easy to understand, read and understand. You can find the exams questions easy to answer.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much. That's quite profound to know that it's the logic behind the math that's what to focus on. I remember I was in a class where you were teaching. That was about 8 years ago now. I remember you were mentioning in that class that there was an interview. So the fixed income role, there was an interview for somebody that came to the class. You may not remember, but I remember that you mentioned this. And when you asked a particular question from this guy at the interview, he told you he didn't come with his calculator. And you couldn't believe that would be the kind of response that will come, from somebody. I mean, because you just needed to understand that you just needed to understand what I was trying to say. I don't need you to calculate anything for me. And I think this is the reason why non-finance folks, lawyers, doctors, have been able to come on the CFA exam and excel at it. I think it's this thing that you have explained tonight. The yes is financial analysis, is highly mathematical in some cases, like when you're dealing with quant, but sometimes it's just understanding the first principles, understanding the things that drive and the message that is behind these formulas that's important. I mean, one of the expectations was somebody saying how to know how to remember all the formulas without being anxious, right? And I mean, I'm sure that person now has it that no, you don't, that can't be the way to go when it comes to quantitative methods. Thank you so much, Prof. That's insightful. I'm sure our audience feel the same way, and you probably can engage us by dropping comments in the chat by saying, oh, you understand this, you get this, you have any questions, whatever it is about this, but you move on. So and I would say that, Prof, you spoke a bit more to level 1. Is it the same at level 2?
It's the same concept. In fact, the level 2 QM is more streamlined. And the overall theme underlying level 2 QM is estimating relationship, understand relationship between variables. Wow. That's what all of QM level 2, that's what it's about, estimating relationship.
Estimating relationship between what and what?
Just like regression times. So, like for example now, if I want to see how, say, inflation rate affects the economic growth of a country, then I have to estimate the relationship. Or I want to see how a particular government policy affects the performance of a particular investment. So I'm trying to determine relationship. So everything in level 2 QM is about estimating relationship. And because it's streamlined, it's an advantage and it's a disadvantage. An advantage in the sense that if you happen to have a very good understanding of how to estimate relationship, between variables, right? It looks easier. The QM looks simple to it because it's streamlined. So if you are very good in that area, then you'll be comfortable. So you can easily get, say, 100% in the exam. But if you then happens, the other side, the flip side, if it then happens to hate it, the estimation of relationship is not something you like. There is little or no room to cover for that in other areas of QM. Because everything about the QM, even though we have like at least 3 readings. We have 3 readings. So everything is all about estimating relationship. So that means you don't have a choice to just understand how to estimate relationship, and all of that. So once you have that understanding of that thing, then level 2 QM should be, it should be fine. And, unlike level 1, level 1, you have different subjects or different topics that are unrelated. You see time value of money, it has nothing to do with probability concepts. It has nothing to do with hypothesis testing. You can answer questions on hypothesis testing without understanding probability concept. Description or introduction to statistics or data analytics, you can answer questions there without understanding hypothesis testing, and so on and so on. So the readings in level 1 mostly are independent. Wow. So you can say you don't like this topic or this reading, then you can still make up for it in other readings and you still do well. Level 1 QM. But level 2 QM is difficult to do that. For everything relates to estimating relationship. So it's easy for the examiners to bring a case study, one single case study that will cut across all the readings. Wow. So you cannot cherry pick the readings that you like in level 2. So that's the key point you need to be aware of for level 2 QM. And and don't ever underestimate what they try to achieve with the body of knowledge in level 2 QM. Because even in level 3, they say there is no subject called quantitative methods. But many of those methods, many of the things you've done in QM, you'll be using it for doing some other things in portfolio management. So that's why QM, subject like QM and economics, you will need them without explicitly saying I'm using QM or using economics. So there are basic building blocks that you need to be a full-fledged investment professional. And that's why you shouldn't play with quantitative methods. Even if you are able to pass your exam without having adequate understanding of QM, you still need to find a way to cover that, to make up for that gap. Because later, or even on your own, when you are done with the exam, even if you are going to be in investment industry, work there. So you will see that there are problems you cannot solve unless you apply quantitative methods or you understand QM for you to frame. Even if computer is going to solve the problem for you, the logical thinking behind how the problem will be phrased so that the computer, you know what to do with the computer to solve the problem. That requires understanding of quantitative methods. So level 2, level 1, there is none that is more important than the other. And the funny thing is, until recently, the QMs in level 1 and level 2, until recently, they had nothing to do with each other. They were completely separate until recently. Because recently they just modified the level 1 QM curriculum, and they took a reading in level 2, part of the reading in level 2, the first part of estimating relationship, what we call simple linear regression. So they took that part and dropped it in level 1 QM. So now for the first time now, there's a connection between level 1 and level 2 QM. So for level 1 candidates now, you also have to understand how to estimate relationship. It's just that the scope of the work is not as big as the scope in level 2. But that's the primary focus in level 2, estimating relationship.
Thank you very much, Prof. That's quite insightful. Zainab Lawal says, thanks for providing more clarity on the formulas. I have also focused on concepts, so glad to know I am on the right track. Thank you, Zainab, and that's good. And I think this is why having someone explain this is important, because this is how people run into exams without any strategy, without any guidance, and they just go in and say, oh, it's just calculation, let's go and start solving. Let's grab the formulas, and you look beyond things that are not there. I think one pretty exciting thing about the CFA exams that I like from what Prof is saying tonight is that they're not trying to turn us into robots. As a matter of fact, they've automated the repetitive tasks right? They found a way. They are finding a way to integrate us to the world, to the real market, to the real world where repetitive tasks have been automated. So that's why they are readings on data, on big data, on AI right now in the CFA program. Just so you can be aware that you need to, there is the part that cannot be automated, and that's the part of laying the foundations, understanding the principles, and putting the things right there. So thank you very much, Prof, for that. That's really insightful. So without wasting time, this is where we really get to start taking your questions. It's not, it's a night to just crack down on QM, whatever type of question it is. For a level 1 candidate, for a level 2 candidate, we are willing to just take on more. And if you have a friend that should be in this meeting tonight, I think you should reach out to them. It's getting more intense right now. If you would like to ask a question, you could type in the chat section, or you could use the raise your hand feature. Then that way I can call on you to answer. But right now, what we want to do is to take questions from you. I mean, this ad has been running for about 4 weeks now, or 3. So I'm sure you've been getting yourselves ready for your questions. So for about, yeah, I mean, all kinds of questions, we're good to go. Technical questions. When you are before a prof, there are no technical questions really. So yeah, so let's get started tonight. Okay, so Onyinye says there's usually this feeling that one has forgotten a concept or reading. How can candidates address these fears? Thank you, Onyinye. So, Prof, did you get a question?
Yeah, you know, that's a general problem of anyone preparing for an exam. I can tell you that is not unique to you, because now when you have so many things to cover, apart from QM, you have multiple readings in QM, then you now have other subjects with multiple readings. So it's natural for one to forget. Sometimes it's natural for one to forget one thing at a time, you know, and sometimes the forgetfulness is actually not real, it's anxiety. But even we back then in university, things that I think you've forgotten, when you are now under exam condition with all concentration and all of that, you'll be surprised as to how far you can remember some things that I think you didn't, you wouldn't be able to remember. So it's normal to feel like that. But then at the same time, you know, your study method, you know, needs to be such that, you know, naturally you have ways of remembering the things that you've read. Everyone has his own style or skill of how to remember the things that they've studied. But I personally, my own biggest challenge when I'm preparing for exam is I cannot remember things that I do not understand. So I don't think I always say that I don't strongly believe in my ability to retain things that I just read unless I understand them. So that's the primary mandate for me. So when I'm reading, I'm actually ensuring that I really understand why they are saying the things that they are saying. Not that I've just covered that. I need to know why that is the case. And when you understand, so when you understand how things work or the logic behind what they're saying, it's easier for you to remember in the exam. So it's always good to step out of what you are reading and try to relate with it mentally. Picture it in your mind, try and see what they're trying to discuss and see if you can relate together. Then if you can do that, then that is the process of assimilation happening. And that understanding is happening at that same time. So it will be easier for you to remember. But if you see the book as a mandate that you have to read everything without, you know, without you actually assimilating what you are reading, then, you know, it's going to be very tough, though, remembering the things that you've done or you've read. Because one thing about CFA exam is, if you just memorize everything, let's say you are very gifted with memorizing stuff, and you memorize everything, you can still end up not passing that exam. Because like I said, they're testing your understanding of the logic. It's like doing an IQ test. So memorizing to go and do IQ test is useless because it's trying to test how you are thinking, how you're going to arrive at the answer. So the way the questions are set, so they are the logic underlining the questions. So if you do not understand the logic, then so one may still not do very, very well. So I think someone is asking if the area of concentration is CFA. Generally, there is nothing like that because, you know, what we always advise candidates is that you should strive to get 70% of the exam questions right. The distribution across subjects is irrelevant. The distribution across subjects is irrelevant. So you must get that right. So that means you can score 0 in QM theoretically and still pass the exam if the total number of scores is above the minimum passing score. And you should note this, whether a question is simple or difficult, it will give you the same single mark. So a question that is simple will give you equal mark as a question that is difficult. So particularly for level 1 candidates, you have no business wasting your time trying to solve a difficult question when you can spend the same time to solve, say, 5 other simple questions, because it's total score that matters. The distribution of scores across subjects is irrelevant. But why we always advise that you cannot leave out a subject, because your primary objective is not just to pass the exam. You are being trained to become an investment manager, a portfolio manager. So we don't want case, although they've ensured that with the way the exam questions are set, you know, that after when you are done, you know, with the CFA program, you know, you are still lacking in terms of, you know, the basic understanding that's expected of an investment person, you know. So you cannot say, I don't want to do this subject, I want to do it to catch up, you know. So if you are able to cross the minimum passing score, you're able to, you know, cross that, you get to level 2, it might become more challenging, you know, because there you even require a deeper level of understanding, level 2. Then you get to level 3, a much deeper level of understanding is also required. So you need to make sure that your foundation is good. So from the level 1, invest everything you can do, acquire as many knowledge, you know, as you can acquire. So get as much as understanding as possible from all the subjects, so that the latter levels, you know, or the later levels, you know, can be, you know, you can find them more comfortable, so that you will not be stuck at a particular level. So we have a number of people that they've done level 1 once, and they got stuck in level 2, and they've been there, you know, for years, you know. So please don't leave out any subject. So I want you, if possible, I want you to give them equal attention. But in the exam, note that every question carries equal mark, irrespective of the level of difficulties, because the questions are not going to be equally, we don't have the same level of difficulty. There are questions that you just look at it like this, you know the answer. Then some you have to do some calculations or do some thinking. At the end, they all carry equal marks. So I hope that that's helpful.
Thank you, Prof. That's absolutely great.
Specific questions of what they want to share.
I think it's time to pull up your screen.
Relating to hypothesis testing. Then I saw one earlier relating to
probability.
There's one, someone asked about Bayes formula.
So my question on probability, that's Zainab Lawal. Please, can you take us through the relationship between Bayes formula and probability and put it in practical terms?
Well, so let me put it this way. You know, there is what we call a conditional probability. That means a probability that's calculated based on a certain condition or based on new information. Let's say, for example, now, I'm interested in probability that the country will go into a recession. Say Nigerian economy will go into a recession. And I've estimated the probability that Nigeria will go into a recession. Let's say I say the probability is 0.5. Let's say the probability is 0.5. Then later, I now found out that there are new developments. For example, let's say I found out that just for analysis sake, let's say we just found out that Nigeria government is broke. And I did not factor that before in calculating the probability that Nigeria will go into a recession to be 0.5. So I found out new information that Nigerian government is broke. There's no money to spend. So to update my probability that the country will go into recession, given this new information, so instead of me doing the raw analysis from the beginning of how I arrive at the probability, so I can decide to update the probability of recession I've calculated before after considering this new information that I have. So the probability that will now, the updated probability will now be probability of recession given that Nigerian government is broke. That I'm attaching, I'm updating the probability with the condition that, or with the new information that Nigerian government is broke. So that's what the base formula, that's what it's used for. It's used to update the probability of an event when there is new information. And our example, I want to call a conditional probability. In this case, probability of recession under the condition that the government is broke. And mathematically, I don't know if I can share my screen now.
Absolutely, please.
Okay.
So guys, grab your writing pads.
I can't select this. I can't select this from the other screen.
From the other device?
Yeah, I don't know. Is there a constraint?
Okay, do I need to make you?
No, it's not selecting.
Okay, maybe, hold on, let me see, let me make you co-host on that. Perhaps you should be able to. Yeah, so let's see. One moment, everyone. I think you can also use the time to grab your notepads and pen if you don't, and also inform a friend or a colleague that should be here that it's getting hotter as it were. Thank you very much.
Let me sign in again.
Okay. Okay, so while Prof is getting that started, okay, are you ready? Are you ready now?
No, not yet.
Okay, so while Prof is, okay, that's fine. So while Prof is getting his screen ready for his notepad where he can write and share on a different screen, let's find out how many of us are writing the level 1 exams. Just type level 1, level 1, level 1, and if it's level 2, level 2, level 2, level 3, and it's level 3, please in the chat. Let's just have an idea. Thank you, Lawrence. Level 1, 1, 2, on here, level 1. Okay, level 1, Sile, Zainab, level 1, Shagun, level 1, thank you. Okay, level 2, Abiodun Adeboye, thank you. Test, level 1, thank you. Iguilo, level 2, that's fine. Okay. Level 2, Iguilo, Fatia. Level 1, Cynthia, Taiwo, level 1, okay. Fair enough. Level 2, level 1, okay. Is there any level 3 on the call? Thank you, Namdi, level 1. Okay, level 1, level, okay.
Okay, please, can you see my screen now?
Absolutely. Yes, we can see your screen now. Yeah, thank you. You guys, please confirm that you can't see, please, by typing in the chat or something.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We can see.
So I've explained the concept behind Bayes formula. It's a way of calculating the conditional probability of an event. The probability that something will happen under certain condition or given. So that other condition, that condition is called the given event. And the way to remember the formula is easy, the Bayes formula. Now, if I write probability of an event, for example, if I say probability of A, that's probability of event A. But if I want to write conditional probability of A, let's say A given condition B, we write it as probability of A given condition B. These two, they refer to probability of A, except that the first one is the unconditional probability of A. This one is a conditional probability of A. Conditional probability of A. Unconditional probability of A. So the condition here is the event B. That means the probability of A has been updated given the event B has occurred. Now, and one thing you should note, let's say we have two events, event A and event B. There is what is called joint probability between event A and B. The probability that the two events will happen together. Or sometimes you can write it as a probability of A intersection B. Probability that the two events will happen together. Now, if one of these events depends on the other, the joint probability of these two events, A and B, is the same irrespective of which one depends on the other. Whether it's A that depends on B or B that depends on A, the joint probability of the two events is the same. So the joint probability of A and B is the same, is equal to probability of A multiplied by probability of B given A. In this case, B depends on A. It's B that is conditional on A. This is also the same. It's also equal to a case where A is the one that depends on B. That means the same as probability of A given B multiplied by probability of B. So joint probabilities is the product of the two probabilities. It will be the same irrespective of which event depends on the other. So then what I'm telling you is that probability of A times probability of B given A should be the same as probability of A given B multiplied by probability of B. That the joint probability between two events is the same, irrespective of which one depends on the other. That is the logic you need to understand to remember the Bayes formula. So it now depends on which conditional probability you are looking for. So if the question I'm trying to solve is asking me for conditional probability of B, then I'll make conditional probability of B subject of the formula. Then to be probability of B given A is equal to probability of A given B multiplied by probability of B, then divided by probability of A. That's what they call Bayes formula. In this case, we are using it to find conditional probability of B. But on the other hand, what I'm looking for is conditional probability of A, which is this one. So I'll make that one subject of the formula. If I make that one subject of the formula, now then because probability of A given B will be equal to probability of A times probability of B given A, then divided by probability of what? B. Whether it's equation 1 or equation 2, that's Bayes formula. But equation 1 is calculating the conditional probability of B, where the condition is event A. Equation 2 is calculating conditional probability of A, where the condition is event B. So that's how to remember Bayes. The logic behind Bayes formula is that the joint probability between two events is the same, irrespective of which event depends on the other. The probability that two events will happen together is the same, whether it's event A that depends on B or it's event B that depends on A. So if you lay it out like that, then you can calculate any conditional probability. So you're either looking for conditional probability of A or conditional probability of B. So they will now have to give you the other pieces of information. So, and note, equation 1 and 2, that numerator is the joint probability. So if they've already given you the joint probability, you just put it in the numerator, then you divide it by the relevant probability, either probability A or divide by probability B, depending on which conditional probability you are looking for. So in the context of what I said earlier, if I'm using equation A, I'm calculating probability of B, equation 1, probability of B given A. So A is the new information. So I want to update probability of B given the new information, which is information A. I didn't have that information A before. So that was the probability of B given A. In the second equation, I'm updating probability of A given the new information, what? B. Because there is original probability of A, but this one is probability of A given B. Then I'm updating this original probability of A here, this one. I'm updating it to reflect the new condition B or new information. Is that understood, please? So the person that asked that question can confirm that we are fine with that.
Hi, Zainab. Yeah. Hi, Zainab. Are you comfortable? She says yes. Thank you. Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, Prof. So we take Bolly Oluwasegun. He says, how do you easily distinguish between null hypothesis and alternative, when to reject and when to accept?
So null hypothesis versus alternative hypothesis. Now, the null hypothesis of a test is the primary focus of your testing procedure. When you say you are conducting a hypothesis testing, what you are testing is the null. You will never have to test the alternative hypothesis. Anytime you are conducting a test, what is being tested is the null hypothesis, irrespective of what the question is asking you to test. But when you're conducting a test, what is being tested is the null hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis is just there so that in the event that the null hypothesis is rejected, then you will go with the alternative. You know, the illustration I always give is, I always give that in class. Imagine a guy or a lady that is planning to get married, and he has a primary boyfriend and a secondary boyfriend. Now, the primary boyfriend is the one that is being tested. You are analyzing the behavior, whether it's behaving well or not. Does it spend very well? Does it take care of you or not? The secondary boyfriend is not subjected to that same level of test. Then to see your parents, to see your relative is the primary boyfriend that you are introducing. He is being tested. The secondary is just there in case the primary is rejected. So if the primary is rejected for whatever reason, the family say they don't want that guy, then you can then fall back on the secondary as the alternative, So that's exactly what we are saying here. So there is primary hypothesis that is being tested. That's the null. So the alternative is just there in the event that the null is rejected, then you have something to go with. Then how do you distinguish between the two? First, you must note this. Your null hypothesis must carry equality sign at all times. Your null hypothesis must carry equality sign at all times. Then every null hypothesis you have, there must be equality sign there. That means your null hypothesis can have equal to, you can have this H naught, maybe whatever the hypothesis, let's say mu is equal to 0. Then another possibility, you can have greater than or equal to 0. Another possibility, you can have less than or equal to what? 0. So these are possible null hypothesis signs. If you look at these three null hypotheses, look at all the three of them, this null hypothesis. What is common to all the three expressions? You see that equality sign is common. Equality sign, equality sign, equality sign. So null hypothesis must carry equality sign. On the other hand, your alternative hypothesis must never carry equality sign. Alternative hypothesis cannot carry equality sign. And that is why the sign that alternative hypothesis can carry is not equal to, less than, greater than. There must be no equality sign in alternative hypothesis. I hope you follow what I'm saying. So that's the first way to know which one is the null, which one is the alternative. You have to look at which one carries equality sign. The one that carries equality sign is the null hypothesis. And the one that does not carry equality sign is the alternative hypothesis. And they are opposites. Both of them cannot be true, and both of them cannot be false at the same time. Because the alternative is there in case you reject the null. So they must be opposites. And that is why the opposite of equal to, if you look at this first null hypothesis that says mean is equal to 0, the opposite will be that the opposite of equal to sign is not equal to. It will be not equal to. So alternative will have to be not equal to 0. If the null is saying that mean is greater than or equal to 0, see, greater than or equal to, what's the opposite of greater than? Greater than or equal to. So the opposite of it will be less than. That's the one that is not covered, is less than. So your alternative must carry less than sign.
Yeah.
If your null carries less than or equal to, then the opposite must be what? Greater than. So your alternative is the opposite of the null. They cannot both be true at the same time, and they cannot both be false at the same time. So having said this, now you have to look at the question. What they ask you to test in the question may end up being the null hypothesis, or can end up being the alternative hypothesis. Candidates naturally assume that you have to know your null hypothesis first before you know the alternative hypothesis. That is not true. It depends on the question. Some questions, the information in the question will tell you the alternative first. Then once you know the alternative, then you can then infer what the null hypothesis is. For example, now, if I ask you that, if the question says, test the hypothesis that mean is greater than 30, test the hypothesis that mean is greater than 30. If a question asks you to test this hypothesis, test the hypothesis that mean is greater than 30. So this focus of the question, test the hypothesis mean is greater than 30. Where does it fit into? Do you think the question is a null hypothesis or is an alternative hypothesis? I want you guys to respond, particularly the person asking the question. Which is the null hypothesis? This question, test that the mean is greater than 30. Do you think it's a null hypothesis or is the alternative hypothesis? Based on what I've explained.
You can raise your hand if you want to say something. We will allow you to mute your microphones.
So everybody is answering correctly. It's alternative.
Yeah,
it's alternative.
Yeah.
And do you know why that is the case? Because of the sign that it carries. It carries a greater than sign. The question carries a greater than sign. So what you are supposed to do in the exam is this hypothesis that mean, they ask you to test that mean is greater than 30. So that's your alternative hypothesis. So your H1 is that mean is greater than what? 30. So you set your alternative first, but that's what the question is. Then what will not be your null? Your null will not be the opposite of that. So the opposite of this will not be that mean is less than or equal to what? 30. So that's how you set. So in fact, when they ask you a question like that, the question will just be, what is the appropriate null and alternative hypothesis? That does not involve calculation. So it is wrong for you to assume that what they are asking in the question must be the null hypothesis. No, it depends on the sign that the question carries. If what is in the question carries equality sign somehow, then it must be the null hypothesis. It must be the null hypothesis. But if what they ask in the question does not carry equality sign, then you must make it the alternative hypothesis. Then the opposite then becomes the null. Then note this. Even though this is our question, the question is that we should test that mean is greater than 30. Unfortunately, what the question is asking us is now in the alternative, is the alternative. And like I told you earlier, we don't directly test the alternative. When you are conducting any hypothesis testing, what is being tested is the null hypothesis at all times. So even if the question we are trying to answer is in the alternative hypothesis, you still end up testing the null hypothesis. So all the tests you conduct will be for the null hypothesis. And based on the conclusion of that test, if you end up accepting the null hypothesis, that means you will then reject the alternative. That means the question, the test that they should test whether is greater than 30, that means false, it's not greater than 30. If you test the null and you end up rejecting the null, that means you go with the alternative. So note, you must test the null hypothesis at all times. But the focus of the question may be null hypothesis and it can be alternative hypothesis. It depends on the sign that it carries. I hope that is clear. Then to now answer the last part of that question, how do you know? Don't forget, we've said that we are testing the null hypothesis. So how do you know when to reject the null hypothesis or when to accept the null hypothesis? Or in the statistical statement, instead of saying accept, sometimes they can say fail to reject. Fail to reject. Fail to reject is accept for the purpose of our conversation, so that we are not having problem with linguistics. So how do we test the null hypothesis to know whether to accept or to reject? Now, for you to conduct any hypothesis testing, you need two things. One, you need the level of significance of the test. Level of significance, which we typically represent as alpha, level of significance. And we represent it with alpha in the curriculum. Now, what does this level of significance, what does it represent? In layman terms, it represents the probability that the null hypothesis will be rejected. It represents the probability that the null hypothesis will be rejected. So if I'm working with a 5% level of significance, what it means is that I should do the test while allowing for probability of the null hypothesis being rejected to be what? 5%. So you should construct what we call acceptance region and rejection region for the test. But in any case, the rejection region, the total probability of the rejection region must be equal to your level of significance. If we assume we are using normal distribution for the test in question, if you sketch a normal distribution, a standard normal distribution with a mean of 0 at the center. So let's call this scenario A or scenario 1, what we call a two-stage test. Where a two-stage test is where you have a rejection region on the extreme right and a rejection region on the extreme left. So the shaded areas are called rejection regions, the extremes. Now, so in this case, in this scenario 1, if we have two rejection regions, this is called, scenario 1 is called a two-stage test. Then when you have two rejection regions, one on the right, one on the left, you are conducting what is called a two-stage test. And we said the level of significance represents the probability of rejection region. So the sum of, in a standard normal distribution, the area under this curve, if you add the area under this curve together, it's equal to 1 because it's probability. Since the shaded region represents the rejection region, so we have rejection region 1, then we have rejection region 2. And the level of significance of the test represents the sum of the probabilities of the rejection region. So then if I add the area, the two areas together, in this example, if we're using 5% level of significance, the probability of the two areas must add up to 5%. And since the curve is symmetrical, the rejection region on the right is exactly equal to the rejection region on the left in terms of the area. So they are mirror image. So I will assign half here, probability of this part is 2.5, probability of the other half is 2.5%. So if this is a standard normal distribution, that means on this axis, on the horizontal axis is Z. Z represents standard normal distribution. So I then need to get the value of Z here. You know, there is 0 at the center. Any value to the left of 0 must be negative. Then any value to the right of 0 must be positive. So I need the value of Z from the table. the negative version, then I need the positive version of the same value of z. Since the distance from 0 is equal to the right and to the left, so the value of z is the same in absolute terms, except that one is negative, the other one is what? Positive. This value of z, you will get them from the table. They are called the critical. Now I'm assuming I'm doing a z test. They are called the critical z values in this case. If you are using a t distribution, it will be t. So you get minus t plus t from the table. Now, if you get this z from the table, let's say you got minus 1.96, then plus 1.96. That means from the region, from plus 1.96 to the right is a rejection region. That's called rejection region 2. From minus 1.96 to the left is rejection region 1. In between the two, then between minus 1.96 and plus 1.96, that is what is called the acceptance region for the null hypothesis. So you construct this. This is what is called your critical regions. Now you construct this once you know that, say you are doing z test. For this, to construct this, you only need your level of significance, not your 5% or 1%. Then you need to know whether it's 2-T test or 1-T test. Then you get the z from the table, or what we call the critical z values, or tabulated z values, or we can call it theoretical z values. So they are theoretical, they are from the table. We didn't calculate them. But they define the rejection regions and the acceptance region. So how do you now know whether to accept or reject your null hypothesis? You have to convert your null hypothesis to the z equivalent. Look at the value that the null hypothesis is carrying in this our illustration. Our null hypothesis here is carrying a value of 30. That's a normal random variable x. It has not been standardized. So you have to convert that x to z, to the standard normal equivalent, so that you can see where it falls in this scale, where it lies in this sketch you have. So you have to convert the raw value of your variable to the standard normal distribution, the z, that's the value in the null hypothesis. Even though that same value is in the alternative hypothesis, but the alternative hypothesis does not carry equality sign. So that value, the equality of that value itself actually represents the null hypothesis, because it's the null hypothesis that carry equality sign. So you have to convert the value of the null hypothesis to the z equivalent. And that's why they gave you a formula for standardizing a given variable x. To get the z equivalent of a random variable x, you say the value of that given value of x you want to standardize minus the mean of that distribution, then divided by the standard deviation of the variable. Now the value you want to standardize minus the mean of the distribution, then divided by the standard deviation of the distribution. Maybe the mean, let's make it the population mean. Population mean is written as mu. So now if I want to standardize this 30 now, I need to know the mean of the distribution of x, variable x. Let's say the mean of every normal distribution is characterized by mean and variance. And from variance, we can get the standard deviation. So this standard deviation here, we often use the population standard deviation. Just notation. So mean, this is mean. Or we can say x minus the expected value of x, which is mean, then over standard deviation of x. That's how to standardize a given value of x. So they must have given you the mean of x of that distribution and the variance. Let's say for this problem, let's say the mean of this distribution is 50. And let's say the standard deviation of this distribution, the population standard deviation, let's say is 5. So given that information, I can then standardize this 30. The value of the null hypothesis, you can convert it to z equivalent. So the z equivalent of the value of 30 will be that value of 30 you want to standardize minus the mean. In this case, the mean is let's say the mean is say 50 for analysis, then divided by by standard deviation. Standard deviation here is 5. So then this gives you minus 30 and minus 20 divided by 5, which is minus 4. So the standardized value of the null hypothesis in Z form, the Z equivalent of this 30 is minus 4. Although for hypothesis testing, since I'm just using it for illustration, if you are conducting hypothesis testing of the mean, the standardized formula for standardizing it will be the mean we want to standardize. Instead of standardizing X, we'll be standardizing sample mean minus the population mean, then over standard deviation of X divided by square root of N. That's the full formula. If you want to standardize a mean, maybe that's what we should have done. Since we are trying to standardize mean here, doing mean as an example, so that you are not confused. So let's work with standardizing mean, because we are hypothesizing that the mean is less than or equal to 30. So we want to standardize that mean of 30. So it will be mean of 30 minus the population mean of 50, then divided by standard deviation, which we say 5, then over square root of sample size. Square root of sample size, let's say the sample size for this illustration, let's say the sample size is 64. Square root of 64. So we then have 30 minus 50 over 5 over 8. So if you calculate this, so you have minus 20 times 8 divided by 5. So what that gives you?
Minus 32.
Minus what?
32.
Minus 32. So this is the standardized value. Oh, that's strange. The standardized value is not supposed to be. It's funny that standardized value is supposed to be lower than, okay, maybe because we're just using illustration. Normally for a distribution, the standardized value will be lower than the original value. Maybe the mean is the sample mean is too weak. Anyway, it doesn't change what we're trying to explain. The standardized value is minus 32. Is that standardized value you will now check in this scale? This scale you've constructed. Where do you think the standardized value will fall? Region A, region B, or region C? That minus 32, where is it going to fall? Region A, region B, or region C? Where do you think it's going to fall? The first person say region C. It can't be region C because it's negative. No, it's minus 32, minus. Region C is positive from 1.96 upward. Then region A is minus 1.96 downward. So minus 32 is going to fall in region A. So is region A an acceptance region or a rejection region? That's the question I asked from this sketch. So we all agree that it will fall in region A. So region A is an acceptance region. I mean, it's a rejection region rather. Since the standardized value of the null hypothesis falls in the rejection region, then you will reject the null hypothesis. But the standardized value you've calculated is for the null hypothesis. But it's the null hypothesis that has equality sign. So that 30 that you standardize, is a null, is a figure for null hypothesis. That's why I said that when you are conducting the hypothesis testing, what is being tested is the null hypothesis. So since the standardized value falls in the rejection region, we will reject the null hypothesis. We will reject the null hypothesis. That's the conclusion. But because the question says that the claim in the question is the alternative hypothesis. So what are you going to do with the alternative hypothesis, which is the claim that they want you to test in the question itself? So what we then do to the alternative hypothesis, since you rejected the null, then you then have to what? Accept the what? Alternative. That means the claim that the mean is greater than 30 is true under using 5% level of significance. So you see how you tested the null, you tested the null, then from what happened to the null, then you were able to infer what happens to the alternative, which then happens to be the focus of the question. Because the question says test the hypothesis that the mean is greater than 30. But because it does not have equality sign, we have to make the question the alternative hypothesis. Then the opposite will be the null. So always remember this. The focus of the question in the exam must be the null or the alternative, depending on whether it carries equality sign or it does not. If it carries equality sign, you make it the null. If it does not carry equality sign, you make it the alternative. So the most important thing is for you to construct the critical region. And for you to construct the critical region, you need your level of significance. And the scenario one we looked at is a case of two-tailed test. You can have a case of one-tailed test. That means where you have only a single rejection region. For example, you can have this standard normal distribution. Say you have a rejection region only on the left. So Z, that the whole of your probability of rejection, the whole of your 5% will be in that single rejection, since there's only a single rejection region. So this is what is called a one-tailed test. One-tailed test. One-tailed is one-tailed because you have only one rejection region from this point. So you need to get the value of Z from the table, this negative value of Z. So from that point to the left is your only rejection region. Then from that point to the whole of the right is your acceptance what? Region. Then you calculate your Z. If we're doing, so this particular one-tailed test is called a lower tailed test, lower tailed, because the rejection region is on the left. It's called lower tailed test, or they can call it left tailed test, left tailed test, because the rejection region is on the left. Then you can also have one where the rejection region is on the right. That's also another one-tailed test. Rejection region on the right only. So the whole probability goes to, so this is also a one-tailed test. And this particular one-tailed test, the type of one-tailed test you have here is upper-tailed test, or you can call it right-tailed test. So how do you know whether you are doing one-tailed test or whether you are doing lower-tailed or upper-tailed? Or let's say between two-tailed and one-tailed, is the sign of the alternative hypothesis. Is the sign of the alternative hypothesis that will determine whether you are doing one-tailed test or two-tailed test. In the first scenario, for you to have a two-tailed test, then your alternative must carry not equal to sign, not equal to. So that means your null is say equal to 30, mean equal to 30 against mean not equal to 30, not equal to. That means you will reject the null hypothesis under two conditions. If you find out the mean is greater than 30, and if you find out that the mean is less than 30. So because there are two scenarios where you will reject the null, then you have what is called a two-tailed test. And that's why we have a rejection region on the right to cater for the situation where the mean is found to be greater than 30. Then we have another rejection region on the left to cater for when the mean is found to be less than what? 30. Then in between the two rejection regions, your Z calculator, if your Z calculator falls in between, it means that your mean statistically is like that 30 that is hypothesized. That means anything in between is equivalent to we saying the mean is about 30. That's why we will accept the null hypothesis in that case. But when you have a lower tailed test is when the alternative hypothesis carries a less than sign. Look at this. H dot says mean is greater than or equal to 30. Then H1 says mean is less than 30. Look at this. So under what condition will you reject the null hypothesis in this case? If you find out that the alternative is true. And what is the alternative saying? Mean less than 30. Less than that means you find the mean to be less than 30. The center of the distribution is 30. So less than 30 is going to be on the left. So then your rejection region for this test must be on the left. That's how you end up with a lower tailed test. But for the upper tailed test, you have your null says mean is less than or equal to 30. Then your alternative says mean is greater than 30. So anytime the alternative hypothesis carries greater than sign, it means you will reject the null if you found out that it is greater. The mean is greater than the threshold. And if it is going to be greater, since the center is the equality, greater will be on the right side. So the rejection region of the null hypothesis will be on the right side in this case. And that's when you have the right side shaded. So that's what's called upper tailed what? Test. So whether you are doing a two-tailed or a one-tailed test, it depends on the sign that the alternative hypothesis is carrying. If it is carrying not equal to sign, that's a two-tailed test. If it's carrying greater than or less than sign, that's a one-tailed test. And there are two types of one-tailed tests, lower-tailed or left-tailed, and then upper-tailed or right-tailed. So it depends on whether the alternative is greater than or is showing less than sign. I hope that's clear. Now, the other thing you need to know for hypothesis test in general is what your test statistic is. Your test statistic. For this illustration that I've just described, the test statistic I use is the Z statistic. Z statistic is my test statistic. There are other test statistics. So it can be T statistic. So this is the list of the test statistics they expect you to know. Z statistic, T statistic, then you have F statistic, then you have chi-square statistic. Represented as this statistic. So these are the four statistics you have to work with in your hypothesis testing. The statistic you use will depend on the test you are testing, what you are testing, and the information that is given. The first two are used to test for mean. If you are testing means, like the illustration I just described, you are testing means. It now depends on the information you are given. When they say when the population standard deviation is known, you use Z. If it is not known, you use T. So T statistic is an approximation for Z statistic. When the population standard deviation is not known. So T is an approximation for Z. And when you are testing comparison of two means, you use T. F statistic is used to test comparison of two variances. When you are comparing two variances, you will use T statistic. But when you are testing a single variance, when you are testing a single variance, not comparison of two variances, when you are testing a single variance, you will use the chi-square statistic. So the test you are doing will determine the test statistic. And irrespective of the test statistic, it doesn't change the concept of two-tailed test, one-tailed test, upper-tailed or lower-tailed test. And it doesn't change how to place the null hypothesis, how to place the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis at all times must carry equality what? Sign. Why the alternative hypothesis cannot carry equality sign? That's a universal concept, irrespective of the test statistic that is being used. So for each test statistic has its own distribution, like Z statistic, standard normal distribution, T statistic, T distribution, F statistic, F distribution. Chi-square statistic has its own distribution. So the key about this statistic and their distribution is that so there are different ways of getting the values from the table. The values from the table is what you use to define the boundaries of rejection and acceptance for the null hypothesis. So it's the value from the table you will use for that. Then you will now calculate a value of that statistic for the null hypothesis, like the way we calculated for 30, the Z for 30. This is the calculated test statistic, or it's also known as the observed test statistic or the empirical test statistic. So it is what is calculated based on the data. So for Z, that's how you calculate Z. You calculate your Z and your T. Z and T are calculated same way, except that when you are using T, you are using sample standard deviation instead of population standard deviation. F statistic is calculated different. F statistic for level 1 is for testing comparison of two variances. And the F statistic is calculated, the calculated version is the ratio of the two variances. So that means variance of population 1 or sample variance of 1 divided by sample variance of 2. It is always advised that you use the one that is bigger as the numerator. So if the sample variance of 2 that is bigger, use sample variance of 2 over sample variance of 1. So F is in general is ratio of two variances. Meanwhile, your chi-square statistic is calculated as your sample size. Sometimes they subtract 1 minus 1. Then multiply by the variance you're trying to test. Then sometimes we just say n times, some people will say this, times sample variance. So the chi-square statistic is used to test for a single variance. So this divided by the population variance. No, sorry. Why this look like, it looks like two different variances, but it's not the same. It's not the same as F. F is referring to two different samples drawn from two different populations. Sample 1 from population 1, the variance of it. Sample 2 from population 2, the variance of it. But the chi-square statistic is the same population. One is sample variance. The other one is the hypothesized population variance. One is sample, the other one is population. So it's not like two different variants, but they are drawn from the sample variance is from the same population. So in the exam, before you worry yourself about when to reject or accept null or alternative hypothesis, you have to know when the test is two-tailed, when it is one-tailed, and if it is one-tailed, is it upper-tailed or lower-tailed? And when they give you a problem, you need to be able to state which one is it, what is the null mathematically, and what is the alternative hypothesis mathematically. Sometimes they will just ask you what is the correct null hypothesis, what is the correct alternative hypothesis. That's why I say that more than 50% of questions you will not calculate. Then they can ask you, they can give a scenario and ask you what is the appropriate test statistic. Then they want to say whether it's Z statistic, or it's T statistic, or it's F statistic, or it's chi-square statistic. So you need to understand when each of the statistics is required. Particularly distinction between Z and T statistic. How to know which one to use since they are alternatives. So because of time, that's how far I can go on the hypothesis testing. So let's see. I hope you understand the basic concept that you need to be aware of. Two-tailed, one-tailed. How do you know which one is the null, which one is the alternative?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. And when you say this is how far you can go, I believe you've gone really far. Trust me.
So, which other questions do we have there?
Yeah. Okay. So technically, none right now.
About time value of money, but what do we have?
Money, that's the next step. I think the only other question is somebody asking. Okay, so this is the question we hear all the time. For QM level 1, what do you recommend between K-Plan, IFT, and curriculum? Hopefully you can run through that in 1 minute.
Well, for students that come for our classes back then, we always said that after you've come for classes, you can settle for any of those brief materials like Kaplan or Schweizer, IFT. But if you are not going for classes or you've not attended classes, it will be difficult for you to have a comprehensive understanding that is required by just reading brief material like Kaplan or Schweizer or IFT. So you have to study the curriculum to increase the chance of you having a proper understanding of the concept. But more illustrations there, then you see background stories and all of that. So it's very, very important. Then I will say this, irrespective of the material that you then decide to use, as a test of your level of preparedness, make sure that you're able to answer the questions at the end of the readings in the curriculum comfortably. Not that because you've solved it before, so you know the answer. That means each time you solve it, you know the logic that you have to follow to solve it. So let that be your test. Questions at the end of each reading in the curriculum, even if you don't use Kaplan or IFT, you should be able to solve the questions at the end of each reading in the curriculum for you to be sure that you are ready for the exam.
Thank you very much, Prof. That's straight. Abdulkarim Musule, I'm sure you got that. Thank you very much, Prof. That's really comprehensive. If you've never had anyone walk you through it before, walking through those, using those abridged materials will not be the best way to go about it. If you are getting classes and somebody holding your hands, then you can beef up with abridged materials. But then the litmus test, whether you're ready, is the performance at the end of chapter questions, and that's how you respond to those questions comfortably in preparation for the exam. That's truly well said, Prof. Thank you very much. So I think before we go on, guys, yes, we have recorded classes at the Caribbean. I'll speak about classes in a moment. I'll speak about classes in a moment, but I think we can still take one or two more. But in the meantime, guys, hypothesis testing, probability concepts, are you satisfied? I need to know that first of all, then I can give maybe another 10 minutes or so to address. Yeah, Bolly, thank you. Guys, I need to see you responding. Zainab, thank you. It's important. The teacher needs to know that he's getting across to you. Abiodun, thank you. Anybody else? I need like 5 more. I need to know that we are getting across to you and that you are getting it. This is value added. Rosalind, thank you. Yes. Okay.
Remember that you see that the way I answered the question whether to reject or accept the null hypothesis, I didn't say something is greater than or less than the other. I just did a sketch of the critical region and I checked where the value I computed for the null hypothesis, where it falls. From that, you can then infer is whether it's greater than this or less than this. That's now you memorizing decision rules. So that's why you need to work with your mind, sketch the region, see where the value falls, then you are fine.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Prof.
Time value of money, right?
Yeah, we've had a lot of yes. People are satisfied with hypothesis testing and all that. Yes.
So then, so on time value of money, I told you earlier that is the foundation of everything investments. Everything investments. Because investments, when you do investment, the time you invest the money is different from the time that you reap the rewards or the consequences of the investment. I'm not aware of any investment where the time you put the money to invest is the same time you will get the rewards. Unless if you fall victim of Yahoo guys. So they ask you to transfer money to them under false disguise, then you transfer the money. And the moment you transfer the money, you call them, they are not picking calls again, or they switch off. So immediately you've seen the outcome of your investment. So you don't need time value of money for that.
No, you don't.
Because the investment and the payoff, which is zero, is minus in this case. It happened at the same point in time.
Yeah, time zero.
But in reality, because the time investment is made and the time that the benefit or the proceeds or the reward for the investment, they are different. We cannot just say, let's add all the proceeds that we receive together and compare with the amount that I gave day one and say that is my profit or my loss. It doesn't make sense because those proceeds, those cash flows do not occur at the same point in time. For example, a $10 a 1 naira today does not have the same value as 1 naira 20 years ago in Nigeria. 1 naira today, 1 naira 20 years ago, they don't have the same value. So if I've done an investment of say 1 naira, let's have done investment of 1 million naira 20 years ago. I gave 1 million naira 20 years ago. Then today, I realized the investment and I got exactly the same 1 million naira. Can you claim that I broke even? Do you think I broke even? I invested 1 million naira 20 years ago. Then when I'm going to get my money back, I'm getting my money back today. And they say, your investment today is also worth 1 million. So I collected the 1 million naira back. Should I be happy? Did I break even or did I lose money? I lost money because the 1 million naira of 20 years ago is not the same as the 1 million naira of today. And that is why we talk about time value of money. For you to compare cash flows together, those cash flows must relate to the same point in time. That's what the time value of money, and that's what everything about investment. And that's why investing, looking at whether you make money or not from investment perspective, or from an economic perspective, is different from the way the accountant will look at it. Because the illustration I just gave you, the accountant will report profit and loss of 0. You say we did not make money, we did not lose money. We say we got our money back. But to an investor, an economist, you've lost money. Because your 1 million naira, if you put it in government securities 20 years ago, 20-year government security 20 years ago, you would have been earning interest, or even in a bank deposit, you would have been earning interest over the last 20 years. Then today, that money could have become 30 million naira without even taking risk with the money, by just earning the passive income over 20 years. So that is the time value of money. So if you have a cash flow occurring at 0.0 today, then you have another cash flow occurring at 0.5, year 5, year 0, year 5. Let's say I have $100 here, then I have another cash flow here, let's say $200 here. Let's say this is my cost, this is my benefit. You cannot add these two cash flows together or subtract them because they do not occur at the same point in time. So if you're going to add them together or subtract them, you either make the two of them get the equivalent of year 5 of both of them. That means in that case, I will compound the value here to this point. I'll compound. The process of moving from a certain time to a future time, that means taking a cash flow from a given time to a future time reference is called compounding. Like if I take a cash flow of today and I want to look for the equivalent 5 years from now, that is compounding. And that value is calculated, the outcome of compounding is what is called future value. That means I'll look for the future value of 1,000 compounded for 5 years, maybe at an interest rate of 10%. So that would be 100 multiplied by 1 plus 10%, which is 1.1 raised to the power 5. So whatever this figure gives me, that's the future value of 100. So this number, for example, let's say this number, let's say is $190. I didn't calculate it, I'm just guessing. So that means minus $100 today in an environment where I can earn interest 10% on it. $100 today is equivalent to $190 in 5 years' time. So if I want to subtract these two now, since the two of them now relate to 5 years, I can add or subtract these cash flows. Option 2 is instead of compounding 100 to 5 years, I can take the figure of the year 5, which is this 200, and bring it down. Take it down to calculate the equivalent today. That means instead, if I want to compare 200 with this minus 100, I can look for the equivalent of the $200 in 5 years' time, look for the equivalent today. That process is called discounting. That means you take a cash flow from a given date or time reference, then you take it to equivalent at an earlier date. Then what you are doing is called discounting. And the outcome of that process is called the present value, PV. And in this case, that would be $200 divided by 1.1 raised to the power 5. Then I can then compare this PV with this 100. That is the whole thing about time value of money. Cash flows at different points in time are not directly comparable. For you to compare them, you must make sure that all the cash flows are taken to the same point in time. So you either take all of them forward to to the farthest date, then you do compounding for all of them. So all of them relate to that future date. Or you bring all of them down to today's equivalent. That means you do discounting. Then all of them are reflecting today's equivalent. Then you can compare. That's the basics about time value of money. And that's how to know whether your investment has paid or not. So like some people will say that, I bought a land for 10 million naira. Then after 5 years, they sold the land for 12 million naira and they're happy. I bought a land in Nigeria, let's say I bought a land in Lekki, 10 million naira. Then 5 years after, you sold it for 12 million naira. And the guy is happy that, wow, I made 2 million naira profit. This guy must be an accountant. Because you invested in a land, which is a risky investment. And at the end, after 5 years, you got total profit of 2 million. It's a risky investment in the sense that the value of land can go up or down. Then secondly, you can have problem with Omolile and all of that, problem with the title. You might realize that it's not the real owner of the land that sold it to you, Then you may have to erect fence, to protect the land for a long time, But the point is that real estate is a risky investment and you made 2 million and you are happy. Meanwhile, someone that is an investor or as a member or a student of CFA, before you do any investment, the question you are supposed to ask yourself is, what can I make on the money if I'm not going to take any risk? If I'm not going to take any risk, what return can I get? Like in the context of Nigeria now, if I want to compare this 5-year real estate investment, a risk-free investment would be a 5-year bond, a comparable 5-year bond that is issued by federal government. Since the federal government will not default, so it's risk-free. Let's say today, 5-year bond, let's say 5-year bond is offering a yield of 10% per annum. So someone is telling me that if I buy a land at 10 million naira today, that in 5 years' time, I'll be able to sell it for 12 million naira. I'll make 2 million naira land. Then you have to ask yourself, what if I'm not buying land? What if I don't want to take any risk? I don't want to have any worry. What is my risk-free asset? That's your 5-year bond. Government bond. What rate is on the government bond? 10%. This is what we call risk-free rate. Risk-free rate. That means if I don't want to take risk at all, I must get minimum of 10%. But the investment I'm talking about is real estate. There is risk. One of the risks is liquidity risk. If I need my money urgently after I've bought the land, I can't easily sell the land. Just, there's no liquid market for it. So I'm exposed to liquidity risk. So I need premium for that. So if without taking risk, I'm going to get 10%. So liquidity risk in the investment I'm considering, let's say I demand extra 2% for that. Then my required return goes to 12%. Then I look again. I say this real estate investment, what if market goes down, there is civil war in Nigeria, then the land becomes low. I said there's market risk. And for this market risk, I want a premium. Let's say for market risk, I want premium of say 3%. Then I'll add market risk from 3%. Let's say that is all I have to add, 15%. Then someone is also saying I should consider inflation risk. But I won't consider inflation risk in this case because inflation risk is common to both the bond and the real estate. Because the cash flow on the bond is fixed also, so I'm exposed to inflation risk. So because the risk is common, so I will not get compensated for it. So both of them have the same, they are both exposed to inflation risk. So let's now say my minimum required return is 15%. So if I invest 10 million naira at 15% for 5 years, what will be the future value of the investment after 10 years? That is 10 into 1 plus 15%. That's 1.15 raised to power 5. Someone can do this computation and say what the figure is. So if you do that math, then you realize that the investment. So what is the sum calculate is so 20.11 million naira. But look at what they say I will get on the real estate investment, 12 million naira. Will I do the investment? I won't do the investment. Even if I say I don't want to take risks, I just want to give my money to government at 10% and go and sleep. So at 10%, future value at 10%, 10 to the 1.1 raised to power 5. If you calculate this at 10%, what would be the figure? What would be the future value at 10% of a lump sum of 10 million naira? So if I just invest in government bond, how much will I have at the end of year 5? You will end up with 16.1 million. So why will I want to do real estate investment? That at the end of 5 years to be 12 million naira? Just by understanding the time value of money, I know that the fact that what I'm getting at maturity is higher than what I've invested does not mean I've done well. It depends on what I could have gotten or what I should have gotten. So my required rate of return for this kind of investment is 15%. But this investment has delivered cumulatively 20%, so over 5 years. So if I divide by 5, that's like 4% per year. 4% per year on real estate, when government security that is risk-free, does not have liquidity risk, will give me 10% per annum. So with time value of money, you can easily tell whether an investment makes sense or not. And that's why they told you that, how do you get the required, how do you know the required return? That the return you demand on any investment. That's your first LOS in QM. Now you start with from the risk-free rate, then you add premiums for all the risks that you think are in that investment you are considering. So by the time you add premium for all the risks, then you will know the minimum return you should require. You will then say, this investment they are offering me, will it deliver as much as the required return? But for you to do the investment, then the investment must deliver a return that is higher than the required return. Because, so the other way to look at the problem is that your required return you've calculated will become your discount rate if you want to solve it in terms of present value. If an investment is going to deliver a return that is higher than the required return, then the NPV, net present value of that investment, must be positive, must be greater than 0, naturally. So if they told you that an investment is going to deliver a return of 20%, meanwhile, the required return on the investment is 15%, then they then ask you, what do you think is what is the NPV of that investment? Expected return on the investment is 20%, but required return is 15%. They now say, what would be the NPV of the investment? They now say option A, the NPV will be greater than 0. Option B, the NPV will be less than 0. Option C, the NPV will be equal to 0. Irrespective of whether they give you the cash flows of this investment or not, you should know the answer without doing the calculation. So when I tell you the question does not involve calculation, this is one of the questions. Don't say because they say NPV. So if they give you the cash flows, then you do all the calculations, you will still arrive at the answer, except that you would have wasted your time. Because they are not asking for the exact NPV value. They want you to tell whether the NPV is positive, negative, or 0. So if the return on an investment is better than what is required, because what is required is the discount rate, then that means the NPV of that investment must be positive. If the opposite is the case, the NPV will be negative. If they are both the same, if expected return is equal to your required return, then the NPV will be equal to 0. So the expected return, note, the expected return on an investment is also the same thing as the IRR of the investment. When you calculate the IRR of an investment, that's the effective annual return on that investment. That's the effective annual return of the investment. The IRR of an investment is the effective annual return. So that's why when the IRR is greater than your discount rate, they say you should do the investment. When the IRR is greater than discount, don't forget your discount rate is the same thing as your required return. And how do you calculate your required return? You build it up from the risk-free rate. Risk-free rate plus premiums for all the risks that you're going to face if you do that investment. That's why I say it's the minimum required return. It compensates you at the minimum for all the risk you are exposed to. So your required rate of return is your discount rate. Your IRR, on the other hand, is the effective annual return or yield of the investment. So when you calculate the IRR of a cash flow, of a set of cash flows of an investment, what you calculate is effective annual return. So if the investment should deliver those cash flows, that will be your effective annual return. And that's why we say when the IRR of a project is greater than discount rate, that means you should accept the project. Because it means that the NPV must be greater than what? 0. So if what you are getting is more than what is required, then the NPV of the project must be greater than 0. So that's the relationship between NPV and IRR. Note, your effective annual return is your IRR of a project. The discount rate is the required rate, or the minimum you should demand. So if what you're going to get is higher than the minimum you should demand, then you should do the investment. Then the other thing you should also note, when you rank investment using IRR, that's why we say when you rank investment using IRR, we rank from the highest to the lowest, because IRR represents the effective return I will get on the project. So I have to select the project with the highest potential in terms of return compared to the other. So when you rank investment based on IRR, you rank it from the highest IRR to the lowest. When you rank the same investment based on NPV, the NPV, you rank it from the highest NPV to the lowest. But the rankings may not be exactly the same. The rankings may not be exactly the same. NPV ranking may not be exactly the same. Both of them will tell you whether an investment is good or not. They are consistent with that decision. But when you now have multiple acceptable projects, that all of them have positive NPVs or their IRR is greater than discount rate, then you have to select the best of the acceptable projects. The project that is recommended by IRR to be the best may not be the project that is recommended by NPV to be the best, because IRR favors low capital based projects. Because IRR is looking at returns. So the one with the low capital requirements, IRR will favor that one. NPV, on the other hand, is looking at the total wealth that will be created from the investment, total wealth in dollar terms. Your NPV is in dollar terms and is in present value terms. So when you calculate the NPV of a project, say you get $1 million, it means that if you do the investment in today's term, it's like you are creating additional wealth of $1 million for yourself. That's what the NPV represents. It's change in shareholders or investors' wealth in today's term because it's in present value terms. And that is why when a company announces that they are doing a project, analysts will have to calculate the NPV of that project. If they calculate the NPV of that project to be $1 million, if the company has, say, 500,000 shares in issue, 500,000 shares in issue, that means in today's term, the total market capitalization of the company should increase by $1 million today, immediately, by just announcing the project, because the NPV is in present value terms. So in terms of per share basis, if I use this calculation, then the share price will jump up by $2 per share immediately. And that is why when a company makes announcements, the value of the shares in the market change. The value changes immediately the announcement is made, even though the project is going to be done in the future. But what the analysts do is to compute the NPV of that project that they've announced. And since the NPV is in today's terms, is in present value terms, so that's why the market value today will reflect the NPV. So if the NPV is positive, the market capitalization of that company will go up by that amount today, the moment the announcement is made. And if the NPV is negative, then the market capitalization of that company goes down by exactly that amount. So your NPV is the wealth, change in the wealth level in dollar terms. So if you have a project that costs $1 billion and it delivers return IRR of 10%, 10% of $1 billion. So that means your NPV, let's say your NPV is 10% of $1 billion, your NPV would be $100 million. If you have another project that costs $10 million, but deliver return of 20%, 20% of $10 million is $2 million. you will see that, let's say, in absolute terms, in dollar terms, the NPV, the return here is lower than the return here. But in terms of returns, let's say this is project A, project B. In terms of return, project A is delivering 20%. So IRR will favor project A. But in terms of the value that is created, plus $100 million in dollar terms is greater than $2 million in dollar terms. So NPV will favor project B. So which one will you go with in the exam when the ranking of the IRR conflicts with the ranking of NPV? So what you are expected to go with is the ranking of NPV. So when the ranking of IRR conflicts with ranking of NPV, you should go with the ranking of NPV. And the implicit assumption underlining that is that you do not have budget constraints. There is no restriction on capital. Because to realize NPV of $100 million, you need capital of $1 billion. But on this project A, you only need capital of $10 million, but you only get $2 million. So in a world where I have access to any amount of capital, and I can only take either project A or project what? B, and I can access any capital amount I want, I would rather create wealth of $100 million for myself instead of wealth of $2 million, since I can only choose project A or B. And I cannot replicate each one. I can't say I want to do multiple of project A, since I can only choose one and I cannot replicate it. In an environment where there is no restriction to capital, no restriction on access to capital, I would rather create wealth of $100 million for myself. That's why you go with NPV. So the implicit assumption is that you can get any amount of capital you want to do the project. But in an environment where there's capital constraints, CFA does not convert this scenario. The IRR ranking will be superior. Or where I can duplicate a project, then the IRR ranking will be superior. But CFA does not consider these other possibilities. So all they are telling you is that when there is conflict between IRR and NPV, you should go with the project with the highest NPV. But I've told you that just for outside of CFA, if people ask you why, we are implicitly assuming that there is no restriction on the amount of capital that you can raise to fund the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much, Prof.
So because I just have to come back conceptual stuff, but we can't really go more into capital because we don't have infinite time, you know. And one thing I also want you to know, you know, you need to pay attention to different definition of interest rates, like money market, effective annual yield, bond equivalent yield, bank discount yield. You should be able to do those computations. Then you should be able to convert one from one to the other. You know, and how to calculate effective annual yield given frequency of compounding. You know, they thought something like the effective annual rate is 1 plus the stated interest rate divided by the frequency, raised to our frequency minus 1. You know, they like to ask, there's no way you avoid this in the exam. They can give you multiple investments. They can tell you that stated interest rate of each investment, stated interest rate per annum. They can say this investment delivers 10% per annum. This investment delivers 12% per annum. This one 15% per annum. Then they now give you frequency of compounding. Frequency of compounding. They can say this investment here compounds continuously. Why this investment B, they can say that one compounds monthly. Then investment C compounds annually. If we were to choose between these three investments, then they then ask which one is the best investment to choose. Investment A will pay 10% per annum compounded continuously. Investment B will pay 12% monthly, 12% per annum compounded monthly. The investment C we pay you 15% interest rate compounded annually. Now, the frequency of compounding enhances your return. So A1, how did you tell the answer? Did you do computation to quickly tell the answer? Because there's no way by looking at it, there's no way you can tell which one is the answer. Now, when you have different frequency of compounding, you have to make sure that all of them have the same frequency of compounding before you can compare the returns. So these stated interest rates are not comparable because they do not have the same frequency of compounding. If they had the same frequency of compounding, then I would have gone for investment C without doing any computation. Because the more the frequency of compounding, the better my returns. But then they were also careful to make sure that the higher your frequency of compounding, the lower the stated interest rate. So for you to know which investment is best, you have to make all of them to reflect the same frequency of compounding. And the easiest way to do that is to make all of them reflect annual compounding. Make all of them reflect annual compounding. And when you make interest rates to reflect annual compounding, what you've calculated is what is called the effective annual rate or effective annual yield. That's what the effective annual rate is. The interest rate that compounds annually, that's your effective annual rate. It compounds once a year. So that means this one you have here, investment C, is already effective annual rate. So what you need to do is to calculate the effective annual rate of investment, of all the investment. Effective annual rate for investment C is going to be the same as 15% because it's already compounding annually. But I have to compute for B and A. Let's compute for A. Effective annual rate for B will be 1 plus stated interest over M frequency raised by M minus 1. So that will be 1 plus 12%. Frequency, how many compounding in a year? Monthly means it will compound 12 times a year. That will be divided by 12 raised to power 12 minus 1. So if you do this calculation, so you will have 1.01 raised to power 12 minus 1. Can someone calculate that and tell us what the number is? What's the figure? Then we need to calculate effective annual rate of A. What's the figure? What's the effective annual rate of B? If you do that, I have 1.01 raised to power 12, then all of that minus 1.
It's 12.68%.
12.68%. 12.66%. So that the effective annual rate of this guy of A of B is 12.66%. It's still not comparable with C. Then how about A? How do you do continuous compounding? Continuous compounding, you have to do E raised to power the stated interest rate minus 1. That's how you do continuous compounding. E raised to power the stated interest rate minus 1. If it is, that means where M is infinite, that M is equal to infinite, the frequency of compounding, you cannot count it, it's infinite. So if you do that, that will be E raised to power 10%, 0.1 minus 1. Can you calculate that and tell me what it is? What's E raised to power? E raised to power 0.1, then minus 1. You guys don't have a calculator with you. Minus 1. That's 10.51. The figure is 10.51%. So tell me now, A1, you said is investment A. See, the ranking of, so the, do you understand why we are not calculating effective annual rate for C? Because the interest rate we have for C is already compounding annually once a year. So it's already effective annual rate. So the best investment remain investment what? C. So, but let me tell you what this effective annual rate implies. That means for F, for example, now, if they give you an investment with a 10% interest, stated interest rate, and it's compounding continuously, and they give you an investment that will pay you 10.5% once a year, it will only compound once a year. The two of them are equivalent. The same to 12.66% compounding once a year is equivalent to 12% compounded monthly. So that is how to answer. That's the purpose of you learning effective annual rate. Is for you to be able to compare investments with returns that compound with different frequencies of compounding. Investment with different frequencies of compounding. So for you to compare them, you can't compare the stated interest rate. You have to convert all the rates to their effective annual rate equivalent. That will make all the frequencies of compounding to be equal to 1. That's what your effective annual rate is. Let them compound once a year annually before you compare which one is the best. Is there a specific concept under time value of money that you want to share light on? And I believe by now, if you are going to the exam, you should be able to distinguish between present value of annuity due and present value of ordinary annuity. The same thing for future value.
Yeah, Zainab says yes.
So that's also another thing you need to be aware. Present value, future value, annuity due, and ordinary annuity, and the difference.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
any
Prof.
specific question that you want to ask?
Yeah, you can drop it in the chat, guys. Thank you. I'm sure this is insightful.
Nobody in level 2 is asking anything, or you don't have level 2 candidates anymore.
They're here. I would have thought the person who asked about hypothesis testing was in level 2.
The hypothesis testing is in both level 1 and level 2.
Yeah. I think Boli Oluwasegun is in level 2, actually. The guy who
okay, for level 2, where you do hypothesis testing, your hypothesis testing will be t-test, f-test, chi-square test. You will use your t-test to test, you'll be given regressions. So you use your t-test to test which independent variable is significant, which one is not significant. So to test the significance of individual independent variables, we do a t-test of the coefficient of each variable to see whether the coefficient is equal to 0 or not equal to 0. In a regression, now that we even have, that's even relevant to level 1 now as well. Although I don't know if the hypothesis part of it is that if you have a regression of y equal to BO plus B1 x1 B2 x2, this is a multiple regression. So you have this your variable, and you have two independent variables, x1 and x2. So what you're trying to achieve here is that you want to explain movement in y using variables x1 and x2. Or you believe that variables x1 and x2 drive variable y, or whether y depends on x1 and x2, whichever way you put it. So when you've estimated this relationship, the first set of tests you want to conduct is to see whether x1 is significant in influencing y, and whether x2 is significant in influencing y. If I want to test if x1 is significant in influencing y, I want to test the coefficient of x1, which is b1, whether it's equal to 0 or not equal to 0. So your null hypothesis will be that b1 is equal to 0. Alternative, opposite will be that b1 not equal to 0. Remember, we said the null must always, the quantity sign must be in the null. So, and the test you are going to conduct is the t-test. So you conduct a t-test of this b1. So the t-statistic you calculate, it will be the estimated b1 in your regression, this estimated b1, minus the hypothesized. Hypothesized is the value 0, minus the hypothesized, which is the value in the null hypothesis. Then divided by what is called the standard error of the estimated b1. So since the hypothesized is equal to 0, the value in the null hypothesis will be the estimated b1 over standard error of the estimated b1. So once you calculate this t-statistic, this is the calculated one, the observed. So since this is a two-state test, because the alternative is not equal to sign, you construct your critical region. Your rejection region will be on the right, another one on the left. T distribution. So your alpha, your level of significance, you divide it by 2. If it is 5%, you put 2.5% here. Then you put another half here, because the level of significance represents the probability of the rejection region. So anything from here is a rejection region 1. Anything to the right of this is rejection region 2. In between is acceptance region. There is 0 in the center there. So this calculated T, you have to get a T from table using degrees of freedom and the level of significance. the negative of it, then a plus of it. T from table. This T that is calculated is for your null hypothesis. You will now check whether it falls in region A or region B or region C. If it falls in region A or C, that means you will reject the null hypothesis that says, in fact, when you say coefficient is equal to 0, when the coefficient of a variable is equal to 0, 0 multiplied by the variable will be 0. That variable is not important. If you say coefficient of a variable is 0, that means what this means is that x1 is not significant. It's not significant. But if you say the coefficient of x1 is not equal to 0, the alternative is saying that x1 is significant. So if the calculated T statistics falls in the rejection region, so you reject the null hypothesis that says the variable is not significant, then you go with the alternative that says that variable x1 is significant in influencing y. If you want to test whether x2 is significant, you have to do a t-test of the coefficient of x2 as well. Then your HO will be that B2 is equal to 0 against B2 not equal to what? 0. Then the T calculated for B2 will be the estimated B2 minus hypothesized value, which is 0, over standard error of estimated B2. So that would be estimated B2 over standard error of estimated B2. You calculate the T statistic, you check again whether it falls in region A or B or C. If it falls in region B, then you have to accept the null that the coefficient is equal to 0. That means that independent variable to which the coefficient is attached is not significant. So that's how you do the t-test of individual variables to know which one is significant, which one is not significant. Your next task will now be to determine if the model as a whole, is significant or not. T-test is checking individual independent variable, which one is significant, which one is not significant. But if you want to test if the model as a whole is significant or not, then you conduct F-test. That's what we use F-test for in regression. The F-test is used to test if the regression model as a whole is significant or not. And for that F-test, that's when you construct your ANOVA table. ANOVA table is the most examined part of QM level 2. ANOVA table, where you have sources of regression, sum of squares, degrees of freedom, mean of squares, and F statistic, where you have something like this. I know you are familiar with now regression, source due to regression, and source due to residual. Then you have sum of squares. Sum of squares due to regression. You should tell that summation estimated y minus y bar squared. Then sum of squares due to residual. You tell your summation actual y minus estimated y squared. Then degrees of freedom here is k, where k is the number of independent variables in the model. Then degrees of freedom here is n minus k minus 1. Then you now have mean of squares. So this is called SSR. This is called SSE. Mean of square will be SSR divided by k. Then mean of squares due to residual will be SSE divided by n minus k minus 1. You just find the sum of square divided by degree of freedom. Then your F statistic will be mean of square due to regression divided by mean of square due to error. That means if this one is A, this one is B, then A divided by A over B. That's your F calculated. So this F calculator is then used to see if the model as a whole is significant. Your F distribution is bound on the left by 0. F statistic cannot be negative. So it is skewed to the right. Your rejection region will be on the extreme right. So the whole probability of rejection is there. So the value of F from the table, using degree of freedom of numerator against the degree of freedom of denominator, you get that value. The one you've calculated here, that's what represents your null hypothesis. The null hypothesis for F-test is that the model is not significant. The model is not significant. That's the null hypothesis. And the alternative is that the model is significant. So this calculated F statistic is your null hypothesis. You now see where it falls, whether it falls in region A or region B. B is the rejection region, while region A is the acceptance region. So if you calculated F false in region A, you accept the null hypothesis that says the model is not significant. But if it falls in region B, you reject the null hypothesis. Since the null hypothesis is rejected, then you go with the alternative that says the model is significant. Don't forget, you are always testing the null hypothesis. But let me now tell you this. If you had already conducted a test of significance using t-test of the individual variables, you can tell if the model as a whole is significant or not without conducting f-test. For a model to be significant, at least one independent variable must be significant. Once one independent variable based on t-test is significant, then the model as a whole is significant. It's just like that story in the Bible when God is saying that if you can find one righteous person, then he will save the whole city. To save a model, for a model to be considered significant, we only need one independent variable to be significant. So once one of the independent variables in the model is already significant, then definitely the f-test will confirm that the model is significant. Please, I want you to take note of that. Once an independent variable in a model is significant, even if you have 5 independent variables and only one is significant, the rest, the 4 others are useless. The model as a whole will be significant. And note, there are other ways of calculating F statistic. You can calculate your F statistic directly from R squared. Your F statistic is R squared divided by K divided by 1 minus R squared divided by N minus K minus 1. So this will give you F statistic also. So you don't need the O and over table to calculate your F statistic. You can get your F statistic directly from R squared. And you may know what R squared is, coefficient of determination, which indicates the proportion of the total variations in the dependent variable that is jointly explained by the independent variables. So since we are trying to explain Y using variable x1 and x2, so what percentage of the movement in Y is explained or captured by x1 and x2 or by the model? That is what your R squared represents. That's the square of your correlation coefficient. And it's also the same that your SSR over SST, which is that SSR over SST, that's summation estimated Y minus Y bar squared over summation Y minus Y bar squared. So that's where you use your t-test and your f-test in regression level 1. T-test to test individual significance of each variable, each independent variable, but f-test to test the significance, overall significance of the whole model as a whole. And note the concept of R squared, coefficient of determination. They like to ask questions about proportion of the total variation in the dependent variable that's jointly explained by all the independent variables. And you can use that R squared to calculate the F statistic by saying R squared divided by K, then divided by 1 minus R squared divided by N minus K minus 1. So don't say you do not have enough information to calculate F statistic if R squared is already given.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Any specific thing that anyone wants to ask?
Yeah.
I saw earlier, I don't know if
yeah, but because of time.
Sampling and estimation.
He just wanted an overview on sampling and estimation.
Sampling and estimation.
Yeah.
So let me just tell you what. Let me tell you about sampling and estimation. Right.
Okay, please.
You know, if your variable X follows a normal distribution is defined in terms of mean and variance. If variable X, a random variable X follows a normal distribution characterized with a mean of this and a variance of this, then the sample mean of that same variable, must follow a normal distribution of the same mean. It will have the same mean as the original variable, but the variance will be different. the variance will be the variance will be variance of the original variable divided by sample size n. That's what you need to know. That's what the sample estimation theory says. If a variable x follows a normal distribution with its own mean and its own variance, population variance, the sample mean of that variable x will also follow a normal distribution that will end up with the mean that is the same thing as the mean of x. That means mean, let's say the mean, let's call it expected value. Expected value of x bar will be the same thing as expected value of the original variable x, which is the population mean. But the variance will not be the same. The variance of x bar is not the same thing as variance of x. It will be the variance of x over sample size n. I don't have time to prove this. That means, I used to prove it. That means the standard deviation of x bar will then be square root of variance of x of n, which will then be standard deviation of x over square root of n. So in the exam, they can give you variance of variable x of a particular variable. Then they will then ask you for the standard deviation of the sample of that variable, sample mean of that variable. That means they will give you variance of x, or they can give you standard deviation of x, whichever one they give you. Then they will then ask you, what is the standard deviation of x bar? Note, standard deviation of x bar is standard deviation of x over square root of n. Why variance of x bar? Of course, that is variance of x over sample size n. So the estimation theory is, if x follows a normal distribution of mean, population mean, and population variance, then the sample mean from the same population will follow a normal distribution with a mean that is the same thing as the population of the original variable, and a variance that is equal to variance of the original variable divided by sample size n. And that distribution also tends towards a normal distribution as n, the size of n increases. That's the key concept, how to calculate the standard deviation of x bar. And note, if they ask you for the mean of x bar is the same thing as mean of x. The mean will be the same, but the variance will not be the same. And the concept of estimations, properties of good estimate, unbiasedness, it must be unbiased, it must be consistent, then it must be efficient. You must know the definition of these three properties. When we say an estimate is unbiased, when we say it is consistent, and when we say it is efficient. It is unbiased when the expected value of that estimate is equal to the population parameter. It is consistent if the variance of that estimate declines as you increase your sample size, which is true for x bar. X bar is an unbiased estimate. X bar is an unbiased estimate because expected value of x bar is the same thing as the population mean, population parameter. And it is consistent because the variance of x bar is variance of x over n, which means it will decline as n increases, is inversely related to n. So when the variance or the standard error or standard deviation of an estimate declines as sample size increases, we say that estimate is consistent. Then an estimate will be considered efficient if it has the lowest standard error or lowest standard deviation among all the alternative estimates. That means to judge if an estimate is efficient or not, you need to have multiple estimates of the same population parameter. So the one with the lowest standard error or standard deviation is called the efficient estimate. Please note, standard deviation of an estimate is what we call standard error. Standard error is the same thing as standard deviation. Note, standard error is the same thing as what? Standard deviation. Except that we use the term standard deviation when we are referring to an observation like X. Observation. That means the direct data, the original data represented by variable X. We call it standard deviation. But if you are referring to an estimate. X bar, for example, is an estimate. Standard deviation of an estimate is what is called standard error. That's why we use standard error of X bar. When something is estimated, its standard deviation is called standard error. So we use the term standard error to represent the standard deviation of something that is estimated. Something that is not a raw value, not an observed value. If that thing is estimated, you then calculate the standard deviation. Instead of calling it standard deviation, we call it standard error. So it's just semantics, the difference between standard deviation and standard error.
Thank you.
So in the exam, when they ask to calculate standard error of X bar, they're asking you for standard deviation of X bar. And that will be the standard deviation of X divided by square root of N. Then you should know the concept of confidence interval from your estimation, sampling and estimation. Then types of sampling, simple random sampling, stratified sampling, clusters, and all those things. So those are concepts you can read. So is there any specific thing that you want clarification on in relation to sampling and estimation?
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. I mean, I think you've been so generous tonight with this information, and I'm sure the audience can confirm that. Guys, I'm sure I'm speaking your mind, right? So really pretty much Prof has covered a whole lot tonight, and Mushokwe says he's fine, thank you. Mushokwe says Prof and thank you. So Lawrence says, Prof sabi this thing pass my economics professor in this business school. To break it further down, and for me to understand the idea behind the regression outputs. Thank you, Prof. So Ayenitolu Lokwe says thank you. Thank you very much, guys. So just two more things tonight. I mean, we should have wrapped up, but with like somebody asked when I read it, I said we wanted to take a whole, as much as we can, you know, just to help as many students, candidates as we can tonight, right? Which is why we do what we do. Yeah, thank you, Abiodun. That would do a wonderful session. So before Prof goes, so Prof we have just two more things to do, and we're hoping that we'll wrap up within the hour. We'll make sure that we wrap up latest by 9 p.m. But we need to do two things quickly. So the first one is there are people here who have been asking me questions about new frontiers and all that. So I'm going to run through it in, I'm supposed to use 15, but I can't. I'll use 10. Then the last 20 minutes, get your pen, get your papers, get your questions ready. There is going to be, how do I put it now? There's going to be questions asked, and I have prizes for folks who can answer those questions. So you've been asking us questions. It's time for Prof to ask his questions. But just before then, let's take this one so that we can help someone out there who needs to know, just for yourself or for someone who wants to know about new frontiers. So I need to do this quickly. Okay, so this is me talking to you about new frontiers. Please, can you confirm that you can see my screen in 1 minute? I have 10 minutes, so help me. If I say yes, no, I can see it, I can't see it. Okay, yes, I can. Idris, yes, I can. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just move on. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to start from, just a minute, please. All right, so this is Oluwapelumi Fadola, who gave his review and said, I received my CFA charter today, having passed the 3 levels of the CFA program at first attempt and met the requirements of the CFA Institute. It was quite a journey, and I'm really grateful for this milestone. Many thanks to the tutors at New Frontiers Learning Center for the knowledge shared. So this is a LinkedIn review from Oluwapelumi Fadola, who is now a charter holder. Okay, so the CFA program is the most respected designation in the financial markets and investment space in the world. It's administered by the CFA Institute. There are about 200,000 charter holders, and the Nigerian number is growing significantly as we speak. You earn the charter by passing 3 levels of exam, level 1, 2, and 3, and 36 months of qualifying work experience. And your adherence to the pledging to adhere to the code of ethics and standards of professional conduct. All right. So the CFA program is organized into 3 levels, and that's the level 1, the level 2, and level 3 format. In level 1, you are just taking multiple choice questions. In level 2 is multiple choice questions, but it's now supported by what we call a vignette, an episode, a short story. Vignette supported multiple choice question. And at level 3 is vignette supported constructed response questions, and Vignette-supported multiple choice questions. The topic is from ethics, financial statement analysis, QM, which is what we're handling tonight, portfolio management and wealth planning, equity, fixed income, corporate issuers, derivatives, economics, and alternative investments. In 2022, exam date, May, August, November. If you're on this call, you most likely just wrote your May exams this week that passed, or August, most likely August and November, right? Same at level 2, August, November, and of course level 3, August. Now I'm moving fast. So New Frontiers now. Our story is one born out of a compelling desire to help ease the journey of every CFA candidate exam in Nigeria. Everything we do is to make this journey easy for you. Like we say, the only thing we will not be able to do for you at New Frontiers is to write the exams for you. Every other thing we'll do is born out of a compelling desire to just help ease this journey for every candidate in Nigeria and now in diaspora. Our founders went through this journey with little or no support of any kind. However, they vowed to turn into reality the dream of every CFA candidate. And that's the dream of any in the prestigious CFA charter, whether you are of a finance background or non-finance background alike. I mean, on our faculty, we have a faculty member, a teacher, whose first degree was in medicine, who is a medical doctor, and is now a CFA charter holder. So the finance or non-finance background is not a problem when you come to New Frontiers. So after an entire decade of pursuing this vision, our markets have experienced significant leaps through the influx of about 3,000 now, this is old information, 3,000 professionals from New Frontiers who are now revolutionaries in various markets of the world. And we're expecting that you will join those revolutionaries, make an impact where you are. There's hardly any financial services firm where they do not know New Frontiers today in Nigeria because there's somebody there who has come to New Frontiers at one time or the other during the course of their career. So we are responsible for having helped the highest number of candidates and charter holders pass the exams in Nigeria. And that's what we've been doing for more than a decade. And we do it very well. Here are our founders, Ayakule Ojo CFA, Michael Ayima, Banji Fintola, and Olani Ogunbayo, who has been speaking with you since morning. New Frontiers, world-class. We are confident, and one of the biggest things that we have is the faculty of leading investment professionals that we have. You come to New Frontiers, then your teachers are industry leaders that will be teaching your classes. More than a decade of experience in this space. We have scholarships, discounts, and special offers that we continue to offer. This program, for example, is absolutely free, and there are a whole lot of programs we offer absolutely free. Tonight, I'm going to be giving out scholarships and discounts to people, for example, on this call. And we do that all the time just to cushion the effect of the economy and help people not give up on their dreams as regards to earning the CFA charter. The class assignments, there are class assignments, tests, and mock exams to reinforce your learning. There is a no pass, no pay policy, of course, with terms and conditions applied. And we constantly help with candidate support. You see, because we've been in this space for a very long time, and we work with, and our faculty members are industry leaders. When people need a finance professional at whatever level, entry level, graduate level, experience higher, they reach out to New Frontiers because they believe that they will find the best hands among us, right? So this is another review where Busola, who is a portfolio manager at Cowrie was right now, says, I'm happy to announce that I passed the CFA August level 3 CFA exams. My CFA journey has been filled with tears, caffeine, sleepless nights, panic attacks, but I'm grateful to God that I finished at all levels at one sitting. Particularly grateful for the solid loyal length and how it has positively shaped my career. Special shout out to New Frontiers Learning Center that I used for all my levels, and my tutors, Banji, Michael, and of course you can see Prof. Olani's name here. So, and this is the list of all the other faculty members. Now, when you come to New Frontiers, there's something for everybody now. It's not like before where you're either in school for 16 weeks or there's nothing. No. Right now, there's something for you. There's a regular program, physical classes, happen for 16 weekends. That regular program also happens for folks who cannot make it to school because they are in other cities or they just can't make it down to school. you can run an online program on our learning management system. And what that does is that it allows us to record every session, and you have an access to a library of all classes that have been done, whether you're a physical student or an online student. You will always have access to those recordings until you take your exams, right? There's also a quick review class that we run for 1 month for folks who can't come to school for 15 weekends, for 16 weekends rather, but they have been studying on their own, but they need something. So just before the exams, we always have a quick review program that we host for them for 1 month. We also have a self-paced program, which are recorded classes, whether it's online or quick review. We have them available now. So pick your preferred learning route, and there's something for everyone. Now, this is the calendar we run by. Right now, we've concluded the first phase, which was level 1 that ran from January to April. We are currently running the April to July program, which is level 2 and level 3 students. And as I speak right now, people are already registering. We have about, if not over 100 registrations already for level 1 and 2 exams, between July and October. That's for the November and February exams. So please register. And that's why we have this. We're saying you should get ready for a fully loaded season if you are not yet in New Frontiers. All classes in July are going to be full and power-packed. Level 1 classes, level 2 classes, quick review, level 1, 2, and 3 in July all together will be happening. And we have a special package for NYSC undergraduates and NYSC, that's youth corpers and undergraduates. We hope you will take advantage of this and share with as many people as you can. This is a final review. The mock exams at New Frontiers Learning Center helped a lot. The feedback was always a good tool to judge my preparation level to each phase. If you need a prep center, New Frontiers Learning Center is the place. It's unbelievable how many intelligent people you have in one place. That's by Folashade Ogunbayo. That's our own review. So you can contact us today. And like I always tell everybody, please make sure you're following us on LinkedIn. It's important that you follow us on LinkedIn. That's where you get updates about what we do and how we are doing it, so that you can get information. Yes, so absolutely. The link to this recording will be shared. I've repeated that severally. Don't worry, it's going to be shared. But more importantly, you should check out New Frontiers Learning Center YouTube page, youtube.com/New Frontiers Learning Center, for this video and many other videos that we have uploaded in the past. It will always be there, so you shouldn't worry. You will have this recording and every other ones. People who cannot be physically present and are in different time zones, how can they join the classes? I'm actually a past student of NF. Thank you, Abiodun. Okay, yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. You can. We have the online classes are live, right? But if the time zones are different, you will have access to recordings for the time that works for you. However, one of the biggest things that I always say is that just like Prof is attending to you now, there are times, in fact, there are people on this call who are already charter holders, who I know on this call right now, who never met Prof, for example, or maybe a Michael Anyima or Banji Fentola. But after the online classes, they told me that one of the ways they were able to succeed was constantly reaching out to these people directly. So once you join the New Frontiers family, you would always have access, right, to teachers. So even if you're watching a recording because of different time zones, the timing when the class is happening live is not when you can join, because you will get the timetable, West African time. But again, if you can't join because of that, because of different time zones, you would have access to these teachers to get to them just in case there is something you do not understand. And just like Prof this morning, they will be able to reach out to you and help you directly and solve problems for you. I hope that works, Abiodun. Okay, so join us, follow us on LinkedIn, please, and reach out to us so you can get our updates per time. I think that's pretty much it from my end. So let me stop sharing the screen. Yeah, Davies, thank you. Please feel free to always reach out to the tutors, always Andy. Yeah, Davis is actually speaking from experience, I must say. All right, thank you, Davis. So if you need to reach out to us, those are our contact details online. And someone is saying, thank you, Niyi, for the lecture and all that. So if you need to reach out to us, www.newfrontierslearning.com. I will share our contact numbers after now, but Prof needs to move on to the next one. So Prof, it's your turn to shoot those questions to your audience.
So the question, you mean the question that they should answer for you
The one they should answer.
For them to do, for us to determine who will get scholarship. Is that
exactly? Yes. Giving out a free scholarship to one level 1 student, and I'm giving out one discount to one level 2 student. So Prof is going to share his screen.
So, okay, level 1, for level 1 students, let me share my screen.
Yes.
You see the question I want to answer. Just the question.
So it's fastest fingers, right, Prof?
Yeah, the first person to answer it correctly.
Okay, thank you. So level 1, Prof is sharing the screen.
That's your question.
And guys, you have, Prof, how many minutes is this? What's the typical, you want to go the typical CFA route or?
No. So
5
you
minutes?
probably not see this question like it's in the exam, but this is to test how well you've understood time value of money. So say given the following cash flows for a project. So you have year 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cash flows of minus 10,000, 2,000, 1,500, 1,035. So you are required to calculate the NPV of the project for an investor with a required bond equivalent yield of 10%. That's the question.
So level 1, guys, over to you.
Answer correctly. So we'll give you 5 minutes, though it's not,
yeah, that's not CFA standard.
You don't have that much time, but that's assuming that someone has not answered correctly.
Okay, Onyinye has sent in an answer.
Okay, please be noting who sent in the answer and what they said.
Yeah, I can see it. Onyinye says
5,000. So that's great. So NPV can be this rounded figure. So we have another answer. What? This is NPV of 51.4.
That's
that
Taiwo.
what the answer is? Taiwo. Is that 51.4 or what's that?
Yeah, it says 51.4. Okay, there's 1,172.6 Wisdom Patrick. There's 489 Lawrence. Okay, Onyinye says 1173.29. Guys, you have 2 minutes more for level 1. Cynthia says 4,831. Sheung says 117.23.29. Sheung 117.3.29. Taiwo 1173.29. Lawrence 1172. All right, guys, it's time up. I'll take yours as the last answer, 1173.19. Okay, Prof. So you have to give us the answer now.
I just have to calculate the answer. Oh, I don't have the answer before, but now I do.
Okay. So what's the answer? Because
the answer is 1097.16.
1097.16. Okay.
Do you have any answer like that?
No answer like that. Prof, you want to show in 2 minutes what you did exactly?
So,
someone says, Prof, please check.
So maybe I made mistake. Let's see. But let me tell you, what is the unique thing about this question? Why is this question not a straightforward MPV? So look at our required return. Our required return is given as a bond equivalent yield. So the discount rate is bond equivalent yield of 10%.
10%.
Now, bond equivalent yield is a rate that compounds twice a year by default, by definition. It compounds twice a year. It's not effective annual yield. But what you have here, you have annual cash flows. So there are two ways of solving this. You can convert the bond equivalent yield to effective annual yield and do your normal discounting. Use your calculator. You can use that 10%. That's one way of doing it. If you convert 10% to effective annual yield from bond equivalent yield to effective annual yield, because your cash flows are annual, so you have to use your discount rate must reflect annual compounding. That's one of the concept of time value of money. That's why they told that you must know how to convert from one to the other. So annual cash flow, so you need interest rate that compounds annually. You can't use an interest rate that compounds twice a year to discount cash flows that compound once a year, annual cash flows. So in this case, convert to EAY, that's one way of doing it. So if you convert this 10% to EAY, because bond equivalent yield has frequency of compounding of 2 by default. like yield to maturity, that pays coupon, bonds pay coupon twice a year. So the effective annual yield is 1 plus 10%, stated interest rate, which is 10%, divided by 2, raised to power 2 minus 1. So what's the effective annual yield from this? If you calculate that. So that will be 1.05 raised to power 2 minus 1.
Minus 1.
So that's 10.25. 10.25%. So that's the discount rate you should use in your calculator. So you can use your CFA calculator now and say CFO equal to minus 10,000, CO1 equal to plus 2,000, frequency of 1, FO1 is 1, don't change that from the default. Then CO2, if you have a calculator, CO2 is plus 1,500, FO2 is 1, that's if you are using CFA calculator. CO3 is equal to 7,000 positive. FO3 is equal to 1. And CO4 equal to 1,000. FO4 is 1. And CO5 equal to 35. Then where you are supposed to enter your interest rate, so you enter 10.25. Enter 10.25 in your interest rate. Then compute MPV or present value, depending on the calculator you are using. Compute MPV or PV. What do you have?
You should get the answer now, guys.
Conversion is in QM. So the answer is 1097.16.
0.16.
That is one way to solve it. The other way to solve it without conversion, when you are doing discounting using bond equivalent yield, if you don't want to convert it. So the first cash flow, and this cash flow in year 1, you have to discount it like this. And that 2,000, for example, you discount it as 1 plus that 10%, divided by 2. You convert it to a 6-month rate. You now ask yourself, in 1 year, how many 6 months do I have? 2. Then plus your 1,500, 1 plus 10% divided by 2. This is happening in 2 years. How many 6 months in 2 years? That will be raised to power 4. Then plus 7,000 divided by 1 plus 0.1 divided by 2 raised to power. In 3 years, how many 6 months can you find? 6 month period. And so that's how you do your discounting. You get that same 10. Then this one will be, this one does not need discounting, minus 10,000. So that's how you get the same figure. Or if you want to use your calculator like this, so what you have to do, that you have to use 6 monthly period. So you have CFO, so that is what you do. CFO equal to minus 10,000. But your CO1 will be equal to 0 because that's 6 months. Then CO2 will be 1 year. CO2, that's why you enter the 1 year figure, 2,000. Then your CO3, which is 1.5 years, is 0. There's no figure for 1.5 years. Then your CO4 will be your 2 years. You put the figure of 1.5. Then your CO5, we have 0. Then CO6, you put 7,000. Then CO7 will be 0. For CO8, that's why you put the figure for year 4, which is 1,000. Then CO9 will be 0. Then your C10, that will be where you put the figure for year 5, 35. Then when you put interest rate, instead of putting the full 10%, you put 10% divided by 2 for your interest rate. The 6 month interest, 10 divided by 2. Then compute MPV. So that's how to calculate it without converting to effective annual yield first. So you get the same result, which is that
1097.16. Okay, thank you so much, Prof.
Is there under time value of money, unless you are saying they remove it. When they talk to money market yield, bank discount yield, bond equivalent yield.
Don't worry, please don't.
So what I've just done with a single question is to test multiple for your understanding of time value of money, what the significance of bond equivalent yield, how is different from effective annual yield, and why you should know that the definition of interest rate you are given will determine how you do your discounting or compounding. You either convert the interest rate to match the frequency of the cash flows that you want to discount, or you discount it directly, but by using a discounting technique that works with the definition of interest rate you are given. These are the things that you should have mastered when you do bond equivalent. You need to understand the significance. You know, I told you when we started, that you need to understand the significance of everything you are being taught. Why do we use bond equivalent yield? What does it mean? How does it affect our discounting? Like, for example, now if you are given money market yield, if I have money market yield and I want to discount a 1 year cash flow in year one will be discounted like this. If I have money market yield, it will be 1 plus the money market yield. Let's say this cash flow is going to happen in, say, in 2 years or in year one. So your money market yield in year one, okay, maybe this one is straightforward. So let's say you want to discount cash flow in 6 months. You have to prorate your money market yield to reflect 6 months directly before you add it to 1. So this will be for a 6 month cash flow. For a 1 year cash flow, so that's just 1 plus 1 market yield. Then for a 2 year cash flow, you have to multiply the monthly market yield directly by 2. You don't do raise to power with money market yield.
All
so
right.
Definition of interest rate affects the way discounting is done. And you have to look at the frequency of the cash flows you are given. You have to match the frequency of compounding of your discount rate. If not, you have to convert your discount rate appropriately. So if you have monthly cash flows, for example, you have to convert your interest rate to an interest rate that compounds on a monthly basis. Get the equivalent of interest rate that compounds on a monthly basis. That's the right discount rate to use.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Prof.
The scholarship, I don't know what you do about that.
Don't worry. So guys,
but I'm sure maybe there will be some other ways of.
Absolutely. So what you guys don't know is, as a matter of fact, this scholarship has been open from beginning of the year, and it's going to close on the 31st of May, for the July program. We have people in our program right now, both level 1 and level 2, who are even on scholarship, to be honest. So I just dropped the link. You can still go there and apply, so don't worry. So, but good try. Never mind. That's what happens when you come to class. You learn the tricks that you don't find by studying on your own, to be honest, right? So please go to this.
I don't expect the CFA people to do this to you.
Yeah.
You understand?
Well,
I know, but you should know how to convert bond equivalent yield to effective annual yield.
Yeah.
But in the exam, they will give you the appropriate discount rate for the cash flows you want to discount. So like you don't have to convert the discount rate.
Yeah.
But then welcome. You still need to understand the concept.
You're welcome. So what we will do, guys, is there anybody on this call who is at the level 2 guys? Have they chickened out, or they are here? That's what will determine whether we take the second question, so that I can just, if it's level 1 questions, I can clap for them. No, Wisdom, you didn't miss scholarship. Go and apply. It's not May 31st now. I dropped the link already. Did you read it? So you didn't miss the scholarship. So please check it and go and apply. I want to, by the time we are checking the applications, good. Okay, Lawrence already applied. Good. So Lawrence already applied. So Wisdom is fine now. So you shouldn't worry. Okay, Abiodun is here, level 2. So Prof, I think Abiodun is up for your question. I don't know if the other level 2 guys are there. He said, if I'm the only one, then I get it, lol. Okay, that's fine. So let's go.
So I'm going to write your
The last
question
one for
directly,
tonight.
guys.
Okay. So by answering, you won't do that now.
In a regression, with 5 independent variables, in a regression with 5 independent variables, and based on sample size of 100, in a regression with 5 independent variables and based on sample size of 100, the adjusted R square is calculated to be minus 0.01. Minus, the adjusted R square is calculated to be minus 0.01. In a regression with 5 independent variables and based on sample of 100, the adjusted R square is calculated to be minus 0.01. What is the calculated F statistic of the model? Or in a regression model with 5 independent variables? What is the calculated F statistic of the model? That's the question. In a regression model with 5 independent variables, and based on sample of size of 100, the adjusted R square, I think I need to rephrase this expression.
Level 2 guys, you there?
As the guy run away.
I'm sure he's there.
In a regression model with 5 independent variables that is based on sample size of 100, the adjusted R square is calculated to be minus 0.01. So the question, what is the calculated F statistic of the model? What is the calculated F statistic of the model?
You also have 5 minutes. So by 9:10, I'll stop you. Level 2. Thank you so much for the longer. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Or Onye needs a feedback. We gave
Okay.
me 5,000 as MPV earlier. So it just added the figures together directly.
I saw that too, actually. I removed it minus
Are you an
10,000.
accountant, Onye? But that's against the concept of time value of money. You can be adding or subtracting cash flows of different points in time together. They are not equivalent. So you have to discount all of them to today's equivalent before you can add them or discount them. Or before you can add them or subtract them. That's the purpose of discounting. That's why time value, that's the purpose of time value of money.
Yeah. I think she later even made corrections.
The accountant's profit.
I think she later made a correction. Yeah. In scroll up for yeah.
And you guys, those of you in level 1, I hope you've mastered how to use your calculator to do discounting, how to use the normative VM buttons, and how to use the cash flow buttons like the way I described.
Mm-hmm.
So A1, you don't have calculator? Huh? So Ayokunle,
Yes, sir.
Students saying they don't have calculator.
Okay, so
A1 hasn't bring the calculators in back then. What happened?
Yeah, but no, right now we are not able to do that right now. But if you check on Jumia, you would be able to see it. So A1 hasn't registered in school. A1 is a prospective student. So I know A1 will join school.
If you are writing the exam, you can't go inside the exam without the calculator.
Yes, absolutely.
And you can't use a normal calculator, they won't allow it.
In fact, even in this session,
for your own interest too, to bring because the proper calculator, we do calculations that normal calculator cannot do.
Yeah. Really, that's
from
what.
The time you are preparing for the exam, you should start using the calculator so that you get used to it. But you have to be fast at it too. You know.
Yeah. That's typically what happens in class. So the teachers make you solve those questions in class and use the calculator. So, I mean, for when you've done that for 16 weeks, I mean, for 16 weeks, you'll be on top of your
idea. By the way, the QM is one of these, probably the primary subject where you learn most of the calculation functions.
Yeah.
You know, because of the time value of money, because those are the special aspects, normal calculations, other calculations, but the time value of money, cash flow, discounting, compounding, that's where PV, FV, that's where you need special functions of the calculators. All the bond calculations, they're also discounting, compounding. So you need to get your calculator to solve all the questions. So when you're preparing with your QM, you have to use the calculators.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the Texas.
Yeah, that's correct. Values have been discounted. That's true. Because you need to know what we mean by values being discounted. So when we say the value has been discounted, it means that the value is already expressed in today's equivalent. So that they will all have to be under year 0. If values have been discounted, the discounted value must be under year 0. When a value is under year 1 or year 2, that means it's still reflecting equivalent as at end of year 1 or year 2. So if you say a value has been discounted to today, then that value must come under year 0. So a discounted value means today's equivalent of that value. So the only time where you will not need to discount is if the required rate of return or your discount rate is equal to 0%. If your discount rate is equal to 0%, then there is no opportunity cost. So the discounted value will be the same thing as the original values. If your interest rate, your discount rate is equal to 0%. So the answer would then be 5,000. But when you see a value under a particular period other than 0, then that value, it may have been discounted to that year, but it has not been discounted to present value. But for it to come down to present value, it must be under year 0 once it's discounted.
All right, level 2 guys, do you have my answer?
2 questions. You guys are going to, you are reading the curriculum to see the answer.
Guys, do you have my answer now? You've exceeded your time. Abiodun, are you still there? I mean, at least you were bold to mention that you were there. Don't worry, Abiodun. If you struggled, you should just mention so that you can be helped. Do you guys have the answer now? Oh, okay. Abiodun says no answer. So, Prof, are you able to help? Thank you for your honesty. You save us some time that way.
You know, earlier in the class, I don't know if you were listening, I gave you the relationship between F statistic and R squared. I told you that F statistic, F calculated is R squared divided by K over N minus K minus 1. Divided by 1 minus R squared divided by N minus K minus 1. So if you have your R square, you can calculate your K. But I did not give you R square. The version of R square I gave you is adjusted R square, not the R square. So that means what I expect you to know, which you need to know the relationship between the normal R square and the adjusted R square. So I expect you to first use the adjusted R square to calculate the normal R square. Then you then use the normal R square in this formula to calculate the F statistic. So what is the relationship between adjusted R square and R square? Adjusted R square is equal to N minus 1 divided by N minus K minus 1, then into one minus R squared sorry, I will 1 minus this. Let me write it properly so I can see. So your adjusted R square is 1 minus N minus 1 over N minus K minus 1 into 1 minus R squared. That's your adjusted R squared. So since I gave you adjusted R squared, I expect you to use the adjusted R squared to work out the R squared.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get your R squared, you then use the R squared to calculate the F statistics.
F statistics, okay.
So where your N is your sample size.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave sample size to be what?
100.
Then K is number of independent variables in the regression model. Number of independent variables. In the model, which is, how many independent variables do we have? 5.
5.
Is equal to 5. So if you use these two information, your N and your K is known. So you can work out your R squared. Then your adjusted R squared is given as minus 0.01.
Yeah.
So if you make R squared the subject of the formula here, so you have something like, so if I rearrange that expression, I will have, or even if you don't want to rearrange, or let's rearrange, so that we have N minus 1 over N minus K minus 1 R squared,
into 1 minus R squared.
So 1 minus R squared equal to 1 minus adjusted R squared. So if you want to make R squared subject of the formula, then you can have 1 minus R squared equal to n minus k minus 1 over n minus 1 into 1 minus adjusted R squared. So this one goes to the other side. Then that means your R squared will be equal to n minus k minus 1 over n minus 1 into 1 minus adjusted R squared. Then, since this is minus R squared, okay, this will be why is the eraser not working? So your R squared will be equal to 1 minus this. So let's calculate the R squared. So R squared will be 1 minus 100 minus 5 minus 1, and over 100 minus 1 into 1 minus minus 0.01. So what we have is 1 minus 100 minus 5 minus 1. So that would be 94. 94 over 99. Then into 1.01. That would be 1 minus 94 over 99 times 1.01. So that gives you, is my full calculator. 94 divided by 99 times 1.01. That is 0.9589. 9590 actually. So 4 decimal places. Then the R square of this model, 1 minus that. So the R square of this model is 0.041. That means the R square of model is 4.1%. So from there, you can calculate your F statistic. So your F statistic, which is R squared, your R squared, which is F statistic, which is R squared divided by K over 1 minus R squared divided by N minus K minus 1. Because so your R squared is 4.1%. So if you like, and use absolute value 4.1% divided by K. K is 5. Then over 1 minus R squared, 100% minus 4.1%, that would be 95.9%. If you like, you can use the decimal 0.04 is relative, so it's fine. Then divided by N minus K, which is 100 minus 5 minus 1. So that would
94.
be 4.1 over 5. So that means using the R squared percentage term. If you like, you can use it in decimal terms, it's fine. It's the same result you get. Divided by 94. So your F statistic is numerator is 4.1 divided by 5.
0.82.
And denominator is 95.9 divided by 94.
1.02.
So your F statistic is 0.82 divided by 1.02. That's the answer. So what I've tried to achieve is I expect you to understand the relationship between adjusted R squared and R squared. Since I already mentioned this earlier today, relationship between F statistic and R squared. I can calculate your R squared directly from R squared. Then I expect you to know the concept of adjusted R squared. Why do we even use it? And how it's calculated based on R squared.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to be rattled with the fact that adjusted R squared is negative, because adjusted R squared can be negative, but your R squared cannot be negative. R square cannot be negative, but I just said R square can be negative.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. A big thank you to you from all of us, all the level 1, all the level 2, level 3 students, and even alumni that dialed in. I saw one of us, Davis Opabi. Thank you, Davis, for joining in. Beautiful to have had you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. So I believe it's been a fruitful night. You've been a highly engaged audience. Thank you so much for participating. So level 2 as well, you can apply for colors or packs. It's okay. We'll see what we can do to help you. But quickly, remember that classes are starting in July for those who are not aware. This video would be sent to you via email, and I also would be uploaded. Thank you, Wisdom, and thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you. I will be uploaded on what's the name, on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Please feel free to use those resources that are there. Not just this video, there are going to be a lot of resources there. Yeah, A1 will be expecting you in July. If you can send me a direct message, I would, with your email and phone number, I will ensure that somebody reaches out to you directly from the office. So thank you very much, everyone, for reaching out tonight. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Prof, for such a wonderful time. I'm wishing you all the best, guys, in your CFA journey. We hope to see you again at another edition of Crackdown, and we are loading something beautiful again. I mean, this is the maiden edition, and it's just wonderful. So I can imagine how the next one will be. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. All right. Enjoy
thank you, Prof. Thank you so much.
Evening.
Thank you, Prof.
The permission to sign out.
Absolutely, please. Absolutely. And help us thank family for releasing you tonight. I know you still have classes tomorrow and on Sunday, right? Yeah. Prof is teaching on Saturday and Sunday, okay.
Yeah. Okay. I've not even checked the timetable, but I believe so.
Oh, okay. You want me to check for you now? I can.
No, don't worry. I will go and check the messages.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll see you in class. Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Good night.
Yes. A1, I picked it already. Thank you. I picked it already. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for staying through till the end. I look forward to receiving the recordings on YouTube and in your mailboxes. Thank you once again. Good night, everyone.